All right, let's keep moving forward here. We're in chapter 3, more about alcoholism. And as we go through this, especially this first part, man, we got to look at the words Bill uses, because I love the way he writes. I mean, he could have used any old word, but he uses specific words to drive home a point, and we're going to talk about some of these. More about alcoholism. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we are real alcoholics. Isn't that kind of funny, though? Back when I was in college, I'd tell you I was an alcoholic. Right? I didn't know what it meant, but I was assured I was an alcoholic. It was fun. It was great. It was an achievement of sorts. But later on in my life, you ask me how much I've been drinking. Oh, I just had a couple. I just had a little. Now, meanwhile, vodka's spewing out of my pores, but I just had a couple. You know? I don't want to admit I was a real alcoholic. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. The allergy, the mental obsession. Therefore, it's not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove that we could drink like other people. We got some provers in here? By God, you're going to prove today that this time you can drink like a gentleman. Right? I'm going to prove to you that I am not a stinking drunk. I'm going to prove to you, and here's how. Countless vain attempts. The idea that somehow, someday he'll control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. Right? There's my mental obsession. What's my obsession? Somehow I'm going to control and enjoy my drinking. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was controlling it, I sure as heck wasn't enjoying it. If I was enjoying it, I wasn't controlling it. But my obsession is that this time I'm going to control and enjoy it. It's an obsession. Not a good word. Obsession. It's like in my apartment complex, if a pretty girl moves into the apartment next to me and I think she's really nice and I want to get to know her and I take her some flowers or whatever and introduce myself and I'm trying to build a relationship and she don't want to have anything to do with me, right? And then I start following her to the gym and to her work and I become obsessed with her. They call that stalking, exactly, right? That's an obsession. It's unhealthy. Right? I can't get my mind away from it. Think back to one of those times when you weren't drinking. What were you thinking about? Not drinking. Thinking about how you were going to drink. How are you going to control and enjoy it? And look at this next one. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. This illusion. What's my illusion? That I can control and enjoy it. Well, let's ask the question. What is an illusion? If I turn this book into a parakeet, did I really do it or did I trick you? What's an illusionist do? He makes me see things that aren't real. Come on, y'all didn't. David Copperfield made the Statue of Liberty disappear? No, it was an illusion. He tricked us. My illusion is that I can control and enjoy it. It's an illusion. It ain't happening. It's not real. Many pursue it to the gates of insanity or death. God. Again, when I was 15, started drinking, dying from it or going insane from it wasn't on the horizon. But fast forward to 1999, where was it taking me? To the gates of insanity or death. We learned we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. I had to concede. Concede and surrender, I think, are two different things. Hell, Germany surrendered in World War I, didn't they? I don't think they conceded, did they? They started it back up 30 years later, didn't they? After World War II, they conceded. They were bombed back to the Stone Age, right? They conceded. I got to concede to my innermost self. No lurking notion. I got to run through all my plans. I got to concede in my little heart of hearts that I am the real deal. Getting the job, the car, the girl's not going to fix it. Winning the lottery ain't going to fix it. Getting the law off my back's not going to fix it. I got to concede to my innermost selves. It says this is the first step in recovery. The delusion, there's another good word, the delusion that I'm like my brother has to be smashed. The delusion that I'm like a normal man has to be smashed. How did that delusion get smashed for me? Well, I did a lot of smashing on my own, but where that delusion was smashed was September the 4th, 1999, sitting directly across from me was somebody who was just like me. And he asked me some questions about drinking, told me some stories about himself, asked me some questions about me. He smashed my delusions that I was going to be like a normal person. The delusion that we're like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. Can't control it. It says we know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. You can't put the genie back into the bottle. That's the way it is. It says all of us felt at times we were gaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time, underline this, to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We hear a lot of talk about bottoms in AA. Well, you haven't hit your bottom. You haven't hit your bottom. I hit my bottom a lot of times. But that's the good one, the pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. It's not the DWIs and all. It's that inside stuff. That inside, that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We're convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grips of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. As I drink, when I was 17 years old drinking, I could stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning, or in college, do the same thing and get a couple hours of sleep, get up in the morning, shake off the cobwebs, have a little coffee, and go on my merry way, right? I could do that. But our bodies get older, right? We don't react the way we used to. We don't recover the way we used to. Alcohol is destroying our bodies from the inside out, and I don't get better. It doesn't matter how long is in between my last drink, my body's still getting older. And the older I get, the less recuperative powers I have, and I'm going to get worse, never better. Doesn't matter how long I've not drank. My illness right here today is progressing. It's progressing. Why? Because I'm getting older. We're like men who've lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We've tried every imaginable remedy. Hell, science is trying every imaginable remedy. They've tried everything, right? We were talking to people after our last little deal. Talking about the LSD stuff, right? Fast forward to the 60s, they came up with a new drug called Valium. That was going to do it. Then Xanax. Yeah. Then this. The only thing science has done is they've created new 12-step programs. Right? Every drug that they've used to try to fix us has just created another 12-step program. Valium is booze and a pill. Same damn thing. I tried every imaginable remedy. It's insane. In some instances, there was brief recovery, followed always by a still worse relapse. Remember, we get worse, never better. That's what baffled Silkworth. Bill comes in to see him. Bill's in bad shape. They counsel him. They nurse him back to health. Talk to him about alcoholism. Don't drink. Don't drink. Bill leaves. I'm never going to drink again. He leaves. Short amount of time, he drinks. He comes back. He's in worse shape. I always get worse. It says, physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree that there's no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. I'm sure they're trying to work on it, but they haven't done so yet. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe that they are in that class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove to themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. Right? I'm going to try every form of self-deception I have to prove to you that I'm not an alcoholic. Oh, remember we were going to the concert in 1984 and I was the driver? I didn't get drunk, see? Or by some miracle, I at a Mexican food restaurant and only had like 10 beers and 10 shots of Cuervo and I didn't throw up. And see, I'm normal. I'm going to try every form of self-deception. Trying to, take the little, remember when they had the Schick treatment centers back in the 70s and stuff? They did the little Schick test on TV and they asked you all those questions. And I'm trying to lie to the TV, right? I'm lying to the friggin' TV. Nope, I don't do that. Nope, I'm yes all down the board. But I'm trying to lie to myself, convince myself that I'm not an alcoholic. If anyone who is showing the inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hat's off to him. Hey, if you can pull up and stop drinking, God love you, go for it. I hope it works out well for you. I am not that guy. Cannot pull that off. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. Here are some of the methods we have tried. See if you've tried these. Drinking beer only. Limiting the number of drinks. Never drinking alone. Never drinking in the morning. Drinking only at home. Never having it at the house. Never drinking during business hours. Drinking only at parties. Switching from scotch to brandy. Drinking only natural wines. Agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job. Taking a trip. Not taking a trip. Swearing off forever, with and without solemn oath. Taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms, sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. We could increase the list ad infinitum. He's been to my house. You should see my bookshelf, man. It is great, man. It's so cool. Because I've got every friggin' self-help book there is from back in the day, man. I got the Tai Chi books. I've got Tony Robbins. I've got Zig Ziglar. I got it all on all this stuff of how to make yourself into a better man. I tried everything under the sun. Because I thought, if I just had the right workout program and had the right diet and read the right books and did enough good deeds that I could beat this alcohol. I tried everything. Failed every time. Every time. We do not like to pronounce any individual as an alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Hell, the deadliest disease known to mankind, alcoholism. You got to diagnose yourself. Ain't that a trip? Got to diagnose yourself. Hell, people were telling me I was alcoholics for years. I had to diagnose myself. So here's a little test. Step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It'll not take long for you to decide if you're honest with yourself about it. It may be worth a bad case of the jitters if you get full knowledge of your condition. I was going to a psychiatrist, and he was going on vacation for a week or whatever. And I'm trying to keep this little busted-up relationship together, and we're on one-on-one, and he says... And we're getting around to all the drinking stuff, and I wasn't copping to that I was an alcoholic. And he said, okay, we're going to do a little test. I'll be back. Your next appointment is like 8 or 9 days. So he says, what do you like to drink? What's your favorite drink? And I said, vodka, martini, straight up. Right? He says, great. Pick a number of drinks. And I said, 3. He says, great. So for the next 8 days while I'm on vacation, I want you to drink 3 vodka martinis. No more, no less. And we'll talk about it when I get back. Yeah. Great. So I go down to the liquor store. I'm looking for my favorite brand of vodka, which at the time was Absolute Vodka. Just so happened that they had the 1.75 liters on sale. I am a conscious bargain shopper. I got to take the bargain, right? So I get the big bottle of vodka, go put it in the freezer. I wait for the end of the day, pour my first... Now, I kind of thought I tricked him because I said 3 martinis. I didn't say how big the glass was, right? So I drank that first one, and then that experiment went so marvelously well that I had my second martini. And that went down so smooth that I had my third one. And by the third one, what I realized, it was a bad test day. Because I had triggered that allergy, I ended up drinking that whole bottle, and I drank a bottle thereafter till we met again. I cannot control my drinking. Can't do it. Put a gun to my head. I'll wait till you fall asleep. I'll drink. Cannot control my drinking. There's no way of proving it. Though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But why? 19 years old, I was at my first counselor. They were trying, and I was lying through my teeth on how much I drank, and I still came up as a normal drinker. I was not going to stop drinking because I was not in trouble. My mama was just on my back. I was not going to stop drinking because booze worked. Booze fixed everything. When it was a good time, booze made it better. When it was a bad time, it made it tolerable. Booze worked. I was not going to stop. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time. We have heard of a few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here's one. So now they're going to start giving us some examples. All right? Examples of different kinds of drunks. All right? So here's this guy. He says, a man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He is very nervous in the morning. A lot of nervous people back in the 30s, if you read this book. A lot of nervous people, man. So he was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. That's what I did when I was nervous. Half a bottle of vodka in the morning will get those nerves right back on track. Right? He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he had started, he had no control whatever. So he's powerless, right? Don't you think? He made up his mind that until he'd been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. So this guy saw that he was in trouble. He was drinking too much when he started drinking, but he had an overpowering desire to succeed. And he said, you know what? I'm not going to get this if I keep drinking, so I'm going to stop drinking. Was his life unmanageable? No. He stopped. He stopped for 25 years. It says after a successful and happy business career. It may have been happy for him, but I bet he was a intolerable you-know-what, man. You've seen the angry drunk in the meeting, right? Hadn't had a drink for 25 years, but god dang, it'd probably help him out if he did, you know. We know they got those people in Kansas too, don't they? Yeah, we know that guy, right? Good God. You see those people at the family reunion. Well, Jim Bob over here is an alcoholic. He hadn't touched a drop in 30 years, and Jim Bob looks like he's about to spin out of control, you know. Pissed off, man. All right, but so let's see what happens to this guy. Then he fell victim to the belief, which practically every alcoholic has, that after his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. So after 25 years, he retired, and his brain comes up with the brilliant solution. Any man who retired as successful as you and hadn't had a drink in 25 years deserves a cocktail. Out came the carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. Well, they don't tell us in the story, but as far as we know, he hadn't been to the hospital before. He just knew he couldn't control his liquor. Now he drinks for 2 months and he's already in the hospital. Sounds like it progressed, didn't it? Even though he wasn't drinking for 25 years. He tried to regulate his drink. Do we got some regulators in here? Trying to limit those number of drinks? Just drink a little bit? Try to taper yourself off? I can't taper, man. You can't do it, you know? It ain't going to work. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. So he's going to the hospital repeatedly. It's not working out too well for this guy. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. So he put his foot down. I ain't never going to do it again. I'm stopping altogether. I've done it before. Watch me. He could not. Every means of solving his problem which money could buy was at his disposal. He had it all. Best doctors you could get. Every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. Wow. This case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us believe that if we remain sober for a long enough stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. That's an illusion. But here's a man who at 55 years found he was just where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink, and here's a promise, commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in short time as bad as ever. And we did that little show of hands earlier. We've had some people in here with some sobriety and they relapse, right? In a short amount of time, I'm on the rocks. Very, very short. If we're planning to stop drinking, underline this, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we'll be immune to alcohol. No lurking notion. Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop as he did on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can, because none will really want to stop. And hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find that he can win out. Several of our crowd, men of 30 or less, have been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who've been drinking 20 years. And man, I remember seeing that nonsense so many times. Well, when I first went to AA in my mid-20s, old-timers were telling me, you hadn't drank enough. I spilt more booze than you ever drank. We don't say that. We don't say that in our group. We don't say that. That's crap. You go to our group. We got a kid who's got like 3 years sober. And he looks like he's 12. You know? We got some big book thumpers, and they're late teens. I mean, I'll stack up them against any big book thumper out there. They are a joy to be around. They hit it early, young, hard, and they got here quick. You know, they got their entire lives ahead of them. You know, it's flat out amazing. And, you know, I'd be pretty insensitive if I looked and said, I drank more than you ever drank. It don't matter. If you're here, you're here. You know? To be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time nor take the quantities some of us have. Hell, I read a story in one of these archive things that I got. This lady was in surgery. You know, back in the 50s, you got out of surgery, the doctor may give you a little shot of brandy or whatever to recuperate. They did that stuff back in the day, right? Lady had never touched a drop. Alcoholism in her family, never touched a drop, went in for some little surgery or whatever. She's in her hospital room recuperating, and part of the prescription from her doctor was to have a glass of brandy. Never touched a drop. She drank the glass of brandy. They heard a commotion a little while later, and she was breaking into the nurse's closet to get more brandy. From the very first shot. Just waiting for a drink. Didn't know what was wrong with her. She was waiting for a drink, though, you know. This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. Certain drinkers who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics are astonished at their inability to stop. We who are familiar with the symptoms see large numbers of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere, but try to get them to see it. As we look back, we feel we've gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. Later on in the book, they call it a tedious process, right? I went many, many years beyond this, you know, just like it says here. If anyone here's another test. If anyone questions whether he has entered the dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. Just don't drink for a year, right? If he's a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there's scant chance of success. You're saying you ain't going to pull it off if you're a real alcoholic. You won't do it. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remain sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. That sounds kind of confusing, but, you know, maybe we could have stopped. Maybe I could have stopped after that first treatment center. Maybe I could have. If I would have got plugged into the program and did the steps, maybe I could have stopped it. I didn't want to stop. The truth be known was I couldn't stop. I had to drink no matter what. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay anything dry like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks. Make a firm resolution, never ever to do it again. A short amount of time goes by. I'm not going to remember how bad it was. I drink. That's what happens. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is, now here's the question, is how do you stop altogether? How do you stop? That is the million-dollar question, right? How is it that we stop drinking altogether? We're assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. I have this underlined. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he'll drink or not. Page 24 says, within a week or a month, I'm not going to remember how bad it was. Within a week or a month of my last drink. See, this is why sometimes treatment centers are a catch-22. We like the 30-day stay. It gets them back to health, right? But after a 30-day stay, if I'm not into the work while I'm in treatment center, by the time I get out of treatment centers, I got 30 days under my belt. 30 days of food, 30 days for my ego and my arrogance to rekindle itself, and I'm bulletproof again. It just depends on to the point of, have I lost the power to choose whether or not I drink? It says, many of us felt we had plenty of character. There's a lot of characters in AA. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it. The utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. That is unmanageability. The utter inability to leave it alone. That is why my life's unmanageable. How then shall we help our readers to determine to their own satisfaction whether or not they are one of us? Right? So they're giving us some tests, and they're giving us these stories. They're identifying with us. Why? So that we can determine if we belong. Makes good sense to me. The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render even greater service to alcoholic sufferers, and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking, for obviously that's the crux of the problem. Right? What sort of thinking dominates the alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? What sort of thinking is that? That's insane thinking, because I'm doing the same thing. Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. You know, that's why our families looked at us like our heads were on fire when they bail us out of jail or we lose the job and we're crashing on their couch or whatever, and we get a little clean time into us and we walk directly to the liquor store. Because they're thinking that drinking has just cost you your job, your family, your kids, and you walk right back into a bar. Why does he do this, or what is he thinking? So I love this example, Jim. All right, Jim's a good old boy, right? So let's see where Jim's wheels fall off on here, all right? Because Jim's got a good story. Jim's a low-bottom guy, right? Drinking costs Jim a lot. Our first example is a friend we should call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. Sounds pretty good. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. That's like in Dallas. He inherited Sewell Village Cadillac. He inherited something good. That's a good thing, right? I mean, that'd be great I wish I inherited an automobile agency, right? He had a commendable World War record. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He's an intelligent man, normal as far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. Old Jim's got the nerves again, right? On paper so far, Jim seems like a pretty sharp guy. Pretty sharp guy, right? He did no drinking until he was 35. So he was a late bloomer. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. Drinking disagrees with Jim. Right? It ain't working out too well for Jim on that. On leaving the asylum, he's already going to asylums, right? He came into contact with us, so he met the AAers, right? This is what they did. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. Well, what do they say about that? I mean, we're taken to assume, what did he make? Did he do a third step? Maybe he'd done a fourth step. Maybe he's working on his fourth step. He made a beginning, right? His family was reassembled. There's another good thing. He began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. There's a red flag right there. I inherited the automobile dealership, and now I'm working there. Oh no, that's not going to work for me. You know, that's a resentment right there. I got a resentment for Jim. You know what I mean? I'm doing it for him. That pisses me off just thinking about it. Jim, you had it all. You know. Let's see. Where did I? Okay. All went well for a time, right? Not all went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. So Jim's a middle of the roader. Jim ain't calling his sponsor. Jim's not working on his fourth step. Jim's not helping anybody else. Jim's not doing any of the work. To his consternation, he found himself drunk 6 times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with them. Right? So the good AAs went to help Jim, reviewing carefully what had happened. So they said, Jim, what happened? Why didn't you call? Why weren't you at the Big Book study? Why aren't you at the hospital helping drunks? What happened? He agreed he was a real alcoholic in serious condition. He knew, now he knows the kind, he knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he'd lose his family for whom he had deep affection. Jim's got every reason in the world not to pick up a drink and to hook up with these AAers, don't he? Every reason in the world. Yet he got drunk again. Poor Jim. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. This is his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. Red flag. What the hell happened to Monday? I mean, you got to ask yourself that question. I mean, my old boss back in the day, they didn't even schedule me on Mondays. They knew I wasn't going to be there, right? Jim, it sounds like he was on the schedule. He shows up Tuesday. Something happened. I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. Jim's got a little resentment going. Probably a little hungover going into the place that he used to own. You know it's grinding him. It's grinding him. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Jim, where in the hell were you Monday? Jim thinking to himself, I used to own you. But Jim writes, look what he says. He minimizes. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Isn't that what we do?
No facts.
Oh, it's nothing.
No facts.
Who sponsored a guy when you got to the 4-step and they said, oh, I don't have any resentment? Get out of here. Hey, if I got you drunk, you'd tell me all about it. Oh, now that you're sober in treatment, you ain't got no resentments. Come on. All right. But nothing serious. Then I decided to drive to the country and see one of my prospects for a car. Right? So back in the olden days, we all didn't have cars. So if you had to sell a car in the 1930s, you had to drive to where the people were. Right? So pretty normal so far. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. They tell me back in the day, everywhere you stopped, every restaurant, they all had a bar. I mean, that was just the way we did business back in the day. So everything's cool here, right? Normal stuff. I had no intention of drinking. He didn't. He's pissed off at his boss and his life, but he had no intention of drinking. I just thought I'd get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar, for I'd been going to it for years. I'd eaten there many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Pretty normal. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Jim's hungry, right? 2 sandwiches and 2 glasses of milk. It's in italics. If it's in italics, it's in the big book. You know it's important. Suddenly, he had no intention of drinking. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it wouldn't hurt me on a full stomach. Insane. Because if it ain't going to hurt you, why do it? Just insane, right there. I ordered a whiskey, poured into the milk. I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart. But felt reassured I was taking whiskey on a full stomach. Or like Michael said, felt reassured that I ate some chicken and now it ain't going to hurt me. They told you, remember that? Line your stomach with grease and you can... So it sounds like Jim was insane at this moment. The experiment went so well, I ordered another whiskey and poured into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried it again. Jim's off to the races. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering, like pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, which drinking always caused him. Not sometimes caused him, always caused him these things. He had every reason not to do it, yet he did it. Insane. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic. They 12-stepped him. Yet all the reasons for drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion... That's a great definition of the ability to think straight be called anything else. And I'm done.
You're done? All right. How you gotta love Jim. But I don't understand that whiskey and milk deal. That is insane, no matter how you look at it. It says, you may think this is an extreme case. To us, it's not far-fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there was always the curious mental phenomenon that, parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. Next day we had asked ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity, how could it have happened? How did it happen? Jim used the part of his body that was broken. His head. Anybody ever seen that sign up on the wall in AA rooms, that think, think, think? My sponsor looked at me and he said, that one is not for you. That is not for you. My thinker's broken. Old Jim, how well did his thinker do for him? Not too good. Not too good. Oh boy. Wow. So much fun. The insane idea one, okay, here we go. In some circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. And yeah, there are a couple ways to go out drinking. Let's face it. Jim didn't go out deliberately. Some people would say, oh, Jim set himself up the minute he walked into that place because they had a bar. Go do the research. He didn't. He didn't. I hate to break it to you, that was not a trigger what Jim walked into. He walked into a surrounding he was familiar with. It was something that he had been to many times. He didn't deliberately walk in there to get drunk. Suddenly came calling and he was screwed. But there's also ways that we go out where we just fly that, how do you put it? The F-it flag. Anybody ever flown that flag before, where you just go out and Bill talked about it, that drinking for oblivion, and we have all those reasons why we do it. But even in this type of beginning, we're obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely sufficient in the light of what always happened. We now see that when we began to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences might be. No matter what, we downplay it, don't we? Once that fear has gone away, once that certain time has come up and that suffering and humiliation of a week or a month ago, we'll start downplaying it in our head. No, it isn't going to happen. This time I've got a plan that's foolproof. You know, it just never happens right. This next story, I'll never forget the first time I'm reading this book by myself, and I read this story, and I am like, what is this? Why is this in the book? Let's check it out. Our behavior is absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself a few years in spite friendly warnings. Up to this point, you label him a foolish chap with queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. How many? I could have swore the stretch in the 90s, that had to be the longest stretch of bad luck anyone has ever had. That's what I had going. I just had a run of bad luck. And, here's this old jaywalker, he gets injured. Oh, it was just an unlucky day. I shouldn't have been jaywalking. You'd expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Things are getting serious for this guy, isn't it? Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. And the only question I have to that is, how fast can a trolley car go? I always wondered that. He tells you he had decided to stop jaywalking for good and for all. What's that? The old jaywalker's making the firm resolution, isn't he? I'm never going to do it again. But in a few weeks, he breaks both legs. On through the years, his conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. First, he's going to control it, then he's not going to do it at all. The continual promises. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce and he's held up to ridicule. The injuries come in, even more, not only physical, but other things. He tries every known means of getting the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum. He goes to jaywalking treatment centers, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? And the first time I read that, I'm like, what is this all about? And then it all started to become very clear. Look what it says. You may think this illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit, if we substitute alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. Now, when I go up, if I were to tell you my story, mine is as foolish as that jaywalker. You take jaywalking out, you put Michael in there with alcohol, and there's my story. To a T. It fits it exactly. Yet we want to laugh it off. No, it isn't the same. That's just crazy what that jaywalker's doing. It's different when it comes to me. All that self-rationalization comes in. It says, where are we at? However intelligent we may have been in other respects where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? And we're right back to, have you ever wondered why people look at you the way they do? As you're coming off your last debacle. They're looking at that jaywalker. That's what our poor family members, friends, co-workers, employers are looking at. This silly fool that keeps running out in front of fast-moving vehicles and gets busted up every time. There it is. It says, some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us, these things cannot happen. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. I'll never forget the first time I went to treatment. I get roomed up with this guy, and this guy, we sit down the first night, and he starts telling me his story, and I look over at him, and I'm like, you really need to be here. Oh, my God. And I'm thinking to myself, you did what? And he keeps going on, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, if I ever got that bad, I'd stop. Man, you need to be here. I'm just trying to get the heat off. The girlfriend said she's going to leave me. I'm in treatment, trying to keep her at bay. Fast forward down the years. My life made that guy's life look like a walk down a garden path. But here's exactly where I was. I don't intend on going as far as you do. Thanks for the information. That is not going to happen to me. It says that may be true to certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. How many times have they told this? This is a reoccurring thing. The knowledge that Jim found did not save him. I believe, let me get the facts right, isn't Jim Dr. Bob's son-in-law? Last I checked. You go back through the history.
Jim was Clarence Snyder's son-in-law.
I thought it could be either or, but he was 12-stepped by the source. He had as much knowledge as you could possibly obtain. Was it able to keep him sober? No. Self-knowledge isn't going to fix it. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as it has been revealed to us out of our bitter experience. Not out of their opinions, but out of their experience. Let us take another illustration, and we're getting to, if you want to know what a 12-step call is supposed to be like, take notes. If you want to know what an old-time 12-step call is all about when it came to old-school Alcoholics Anonymous, here it is. It is picture perfect. Let's check it out. I love Fred. Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good. He has a fine home. He is happily married and the father of promising children of college age. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred. To all appearance, he is a stable, well-balanced individual, yet he is an alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in the hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of the jitters. There we are again. A whole lot of nervous, jittery people back then. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was very much ashamed of it. You remember those first experiences that you had, whether it was your first visit to the jail or the first visit to your treatment center? Those weren't pleasant experiences. And here old Fred's sitting in the hospital for the first time. Fred's a high-bottom drunk. Everything's going well in life except for this drinking thing's causing him some problems, and he ends up in the hospital. And he's really not too happy about what happened. He's pretty much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. How about that? The doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. Go figure. For a few days, he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. Oh, there's Fred's firm resolution, isn't it? There it is. Let's mark it on the wall. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so in spite of his character and standing. Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem. What did the AAs do when they first met Fred? Underline this. We told him what we knew about alcoholism. They shared their experience and knowledge of the problem as they saw it. They laid it out in detail. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but was a long way from admitting that he could not do nothing about it himself. He was positive that this humiliating experience plus the knowledge he had acquired would keep him sober for the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. So you know what the AAs did? That's wonderful, Fred. But here's the deal. If you do have the mind of a chronic alcoholic, you will drink again. Here's our number. Give us a call if anything happens. If not, you're absolutely right. And they shook his hand, and you know what they did? They left. They laid out the problem. Fred didn't think he had that problem, and they said, okay, here you go, Fred, but if by chance you pick up another drink, here's our number. Have a nice day. Let's see where the story goes. We heard no more from Fred for a while. One day we were told he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. How about that? Isn't that amazing? Fred's tune changed just a little bit, didn't it? The story he told was most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all his other concerns, yet he was flat on his back nevertheless. Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it was possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink. They laid out that insanity, the second half of that first step. They hammered it. And if you want to know the whole tone for this chapter, it's the unmanageability part. That's what they're trying to drive home right here. But I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, in that I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. Thanks for the information, right? Well, let's find out what happened. I felt I had every right to be self-confident that it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. Sounds like a wonderful plan, doesn't it? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, Fred, and you can do it. Be a man. How many times have we ran that through our heads? And for you gals, I don't know what you pull yourself up by, but you know what I'm saying. It says, in this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks. Here's Fred beating himself on the chest. Look at me, I got this thing beat. You know what? Maybe I was making too hard a work of this alcohol problem. Think about it. We get some time separated from our last drink, and we're not drinking, and we think, you know what? I got this thing licked. How many times have you been there? Well, let's find out. I began to wonder as though I had been not making too hard a work of a simple matter. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I'd been out of town before during that particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. Anybody hear that? Everything is going Fred's way. No trials, no low spots. Everything he's doing right now, he's successful at. He has no reason to drink that you could come up with, right? How about that? You'd think, you look back at Jim's story, and we can easily see, oh, Jim drank because of that resentment. No, Jim drank because he's an alcoholic. That's why Jim drank. Let's find out what happened to Fred. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, Is anybody keeping track of this for a second? What got Bill that time in that bar? A telephone. We got a telephone. And it drives me crazy because in Jim's story, everyone says, well, Jim walked into a bar and it was a trigger. That's what got him drunk. And you hear this term, it's a trigger. Trigger's a horse. Trigger's a mechanical part on a gun. If we really believed in triggers, if you got brutally honest, guess what we have to add to a trigger list? Along with telephone. As I crossed the threshold of a dining room, the man walked through a doorway. The thought came to mind that it'd be nice to have a couple cocktails with dinner. Suddenly, old Fred screwed just like Jim. You ever notice suddenly doesn't come with a calling card? It doesn't send you a note a week before. By the way, next week I'm going to be all over the top of you. About noon when you walk through that doorway, you're done. You're mine. There's no warnings. Where did that come from? Someone would say you'd have to have a horrible day in order to drink again. How did he describe it? It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. In his mind came up with, let's drink. Where'd that come from? It came from the fact that Fred's an alcoholic. He's condemned to have that happen over and over again. He said, have a couple cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail in my meal, then I ordered another cocktail. Way to go, Fred. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me that a highball would be fine before going to bed. So I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty the next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxi cab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. How many shadowy recollections do we all have? Oh my God, that'd be a fun book to write, wouldn't it? Poor Fred. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital with the unbearable mental and physical suffering. Pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. That's what we're talking about. Fred's devastated one more time. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over the evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. Fred was screwed no matter what. No matter what happened. It could have been a bad day, a good day. It could have been a doorway. It could have been who knows. Suddenly came calling at certain times. You're screwed, Fred. Hate to break it to you. All right. I had commenced to drink carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me. How they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come, I would drink again. How about that? What a perfect 12-step call. They planted the seed for Fred. Fred didn't accept it, but guess what? It happened, didn't it? They did their job. They had said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. Underline that. My God. The moral of the story. I had never been able to understand people who said the problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. Welcome to step one, Fred. There it is. 2 of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned. Anybody ever have that happen to you? God, that's miserable, isn't it? They're grinning, you're dying, falling, and shaking. Oh my God, there's nothing worse. Which I didn't like so much. Me neither, Fred. I didn't either. And then they asked me if I thought myself an alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. I had conceded to both propositions. After he said, okay, uncle, I am, what did they do? Just like this book. The book tells you something, then it moves on to another subject and tells you about it, and then it knows who it's dealing with, an alcoholic, and they go back and tell you about what they told you the first time before they move on again. So they convinced Fred was screwed in step 1, and you know what they did? Fred said, I am an alcoholic, and you know what they did? Then I love this part. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality such as I had exhibited in Washington was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozens. They gave Fred the worst case of alcoholism Fred could ever dream of. They did their job. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself. How about that complete deflation? There it is. They outlined the spiritual answer in a program of action which 100 of them had followed successfully. Though I had been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow, but the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. At some of these we balk, don't we? Hey, think about it. They laid it out to him and he's like, ooh. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. That was not easy. But the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, step 3, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, as in fact it had proved to be. This is an amazing paragraph right here. This next one, how'd you like to hang your name on this one? Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. I have since been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying and I hope more useful than the life I have lived before. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange its best moments for the worst I have now. I would not go back even if I could. Is that not awesome? And that's what this thing is all about. God, Fred, that was great. Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to thousands like him. He had only felt the first nip of the ringer. Fred was a high-bottom drunk, but that's okay because this thing isn't about bottoms. It's not external events. It's an internal condition that we have to reach in step 1. We've got to be at that point. He had felt only the first nip of the ringer. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve their problems. There I am. I wasn't like Fred. I had to be like that. It says many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusions. One of these men, staff member of a world-renowned hospital, recently made this statement to some of us. What you said about the general hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, correct. As to two of you men whose stories I have heard, there is no doubt in my mind that you are 100% hopeless apart from divine help beyond human aid. There it is again. Had you offered yourselves as patients at this hospital, I would not have taken you if I had been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. Though not a religious person, I have profound respect for the spiritual approach in such cases as yours. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution. Once more, the alcoholic, underline it, at certain times, has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. And we're going to learn all about that in the next chapter. Thanks. Where are we at? Take a break. And are you guys up for doing chapter 4?
Yes. All right, we're in chapter 4. We Agnostics. This is... Don't be a knucklehead like me on this chapter, because I remember my first treatment center and I saw the chapter We Agnostics and I'm thinking, I believe. I believe in God, you know. I mean, I didn't think I had a problem with that. And that's not all they're going to talk about in this. They're going to talk, there's a recurring theme through this, and they're going to talk about prejudices. Preconceived ideas that I got in my head that keep me from the solution. You know, and he goes into great detail, and I think this is one of the... I love this chapter. This is good stuff. So let's just get right into the meat of it. It says, in the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. They have beat step 1 up to this point, right? That's what they've done. We hope we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. Non-alcoholic, the hard drinker, given a sufficient reason, can stop or moderate. That's not me. All right? So now they're going to give us a test. And I know what AA, well, how many questions do we got now on that pamphlet? 44? All right? Here's 2. Keep it simple, right? Dr. Bob's last words to Bill Wilson, keep it simple. Here's the 2 questions you got to answer in your heart of hearts. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. I quit. Couldn't quit entirely. My life's unmanageable. I failed. Or, This is not an and thing, it's an or thing. Or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take. Right? So we've lost, they're talking about the loss of choice, loss of control. It says, you're probably an alcoholic. Welcome to the club. If that's the case, you're suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. That was one of my prejudices. See, I've been in AA since 1988. And I hear all you big book people talking about spiritual experience, psychic change, all this stuff, yet I'm the one who keeps getting drunk. And to me, in my mind, my preconceived notion or my prejudice is that this spiritual experience was a bunch of crap. Kind of wussy, you know? Only a spiritual experience. But let's think about it this way. Like a power greater than ourselves. Is there a power greater than me? You know, is there a power greater than me? Huh. Well, booze was a power greater than me. Booze got me to do things I didn't dream I'd do.
Had a lot of power.
Had a lot of power. You right? So let's keep on reading and see what he says here. It says, to one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live life on a spiritual basis are not easy alternatives to face. You imagine the scales. Drink yourself to death, accept spiritual help.
Yeah.
And for 10 years, I had to think about that. Right? Why? Because I had a lot of plans. I had a bunch of plans on how I'm going to stay sober this time. It says, but here's some hope, but it isn't so difficult. About half of our original fellowship were exactly of that type. So they're giving me some hope. They're saying that half of the early people didn't believe or thought they didn't believe. Bill Wilson is one of them. Bill Wilson had the God idea stuck sideways when he talked to Abby. Right? We'll get into that, but I mean, he had God stuck sideways in his craw, as my buddy Myers says. You know? But he got sober. So at first some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics. We're a bunch of hopers, aren't we? We're not the real deal. Trying to avoid the issue. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. And the or else is keep on drinking. Perhaps it's going to be that way with you. But cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows us that you need not be disconcerted. So we're going to go on their experience. They wrote this book. They're giving us their experience. They too recovered, so hopefully we can too. If a mere code of morals or better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. I told you about all the books that I tried, right? Everything under the sun. If it was about me thinking better, what do they say? You're going to act your way into right thinking or whatever? I don't know. Whatever that never made sense to me. I've got some clear ideas of what my life should be or what I hope to be. And if I could do that, I would have done that a long time ago. I couldn't pull that off because I drink. It says, but we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could wish these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Step one, we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives are unmanageable, right? Our human resources as marshaled by the will were not sufficient. They failed utterly. That means my human resources fail every stinking time. It says lack of power, that's our dilemma. I'm powerless. Step one, right? And I told you I had the prejudice against the higher power thing. But I just proved to you that there was a power greater than myself, and that was booze, right? So I know in my mind that there is a power greater than me. But look what he says. It says, we had to find a power by which we could live. Could I live by booze anymore? Nope. So there is a power greater than me, and it ain't booze. And it says, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, and it ain't me. I'm not the power. So there is a power greater than myself. It's not booze and it's not me. Obviously, but where and how are we going to find this power? Here's what I call the biggest secret in AA. That's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to get to the power that will solve your problem. So I'm powerless in step 1, and my solution is over here, the power, right? How on earth do I get to the power? The steps. Right? When you're on one floor and you need to get to the next floor, how do you get up there? You take the steps, right? The steps get you from one level to another. I'm hopeless and dying in step 1, and I got to get to the power. How do I do it? Steps. It's pretty simple, don't you think? It's very, very simple. I forget who the speaker was that I heard, and he calls this, I call it an instruction manual. That's what this textbook is. This is an instruction manual. But I heard the speaker, and he called it a prescription for a miracle. Because the steps are designed to get me to the power. That's all they're for. That's why they wrote this book. Word of mouth, we would have died out long ago. But they wrote the book to give you and me instructions on how to get what they got. If I want to get what they got, I got to do what they did. It's pretty simple. That means we've written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, we're going to have to talk about God. It's a dirty word in some groups. There's some groups in Dallas that don't want you talking about God. There's some groups in Dallas that don't want you to bring a big book, and they'll tell you so.
That's right.
Huh. Here difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hopes rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. For we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. You've been there, right? I'm all busted up, and I come to this AA group, and they start telling me about alcoholism. I'm like, yeah. And then they start talking to me about God or higher power, and I'm like, Urgh! Mind snapped shut, closed, done, end of story. Why? Because in my mind, I think I've tried God. I've prayed over and over and over, God, please do not let me drink today. I do not want to hurt my family. I do not want to hurt myself. Please don't let me drink. And by 10 o'clock, I'm at the liquor store when it opens. So my mind snaps shut. We know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Some of us have been violently anti-religious. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. Right? A lot of us had a lot of religion rammed down our throats when we were little, right? Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. Maybe we have that thing. Maybe it just didn't seem like it was working, right? With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. So as soon as I got old enough, I read an Ann Landers column, right? I'm 13 years old. We're living in Miami, Florida, and somebody wrote in to Ann Landers about their kids going to church and everything. And at this stage of the game, I got 2 sets of twins below me, and it was embarrassing for me, painfully, to be out in public with my family. You know what I'm saying? That's just the way I was. You know, I was a knucklehead. And this article mentioned that, well, when your kids are old enough, they can decide. And I took that to my mom, and I said, see, I can decide. And I ain't going. I didn't want that anymore. I wanted to be my own man. Look where that got me, right? It says, we were bothered with the thought of that faith and dependence upon the power upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak and even cowardly, right? We looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. I mean, go watch the news. This world is nuts. People blowing themselves up in the name of slicing heads off, people doing horrible things to kids, people stealing money from companies. This world is crazy. We can have a lot of skepticism. We looked askance at many individuals who claim to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it at all? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? Yet, in other moments, we found ourselves thinking, when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder. We've all had those moments. Maybe it was the birth of your first kid, or maybe it was your wedding. Maybe it was your divorce. I don't know. Where you absolutely knew God existed, right? God, you are so wonderful to me, right? Right? But look what he says. But it was fleeting and soon lost because of those worldly things get in my way. Remember Bill's story? God, he felt the hope in Ebby. He saw it in Ebby. But it was soon blocked out by worldly clamors. Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. Underline this. Larry, underline this, buddy. We found that as soon as we're able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, here's the promise, we commence to get results. Even though it's impossible for us to fully define or comprehend that power which is God. Now I got to give you a little story. September the 4th, I get my last desire chip. My brain that day, that Tuesday, is screaming all day long, drink. Drink. 3 days off my last drink, I'm shaking, I vibrate, I stink, I'm unwholesome, I am unlovable. My brain is screaming drink, and I get to this meeting, and that little old man gives me a hug. And I said, I need to talk to you, Cliff. And he looked at me like over the top of his glasses when your grandpa means business. He looked me dead in the eye and he says, what the hell can I do for you? And I said, I'm scared and I don't want to die drunk. And he took me back into a room before the meeting started and he smashed my illusions of alcoholism, right? He gave me a good case of alcoholism. He became my sponsor. We already talked about that. He gave me some stuff to read that night. He told me when I got home to my little crappy apartment at the time to look up at my ceiling. He said, you just tell God thank you that you got another chance. And he gave me some stuff to read, right? And I got cleaned up that night. Talked to my sainted mother on the phone, and that's another story. We'll get into it later or something. But I got ready, and I told Mom, I said, okay, well, I got this new sponsor, blah, 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 blah. And he told me some stuff to read, and I'm scared of the old man, so I better read. I'll call you. Love you. Bye. And I started reading this book, what he told me to read. And as I laid my head down on my couch, because I didn't have a bed, I laid my head down on my couch after I said that little prayer. And I knew one thing. And I don't know where this thought came from. This is desire chip number 38 or 39. I had one thought, and that thought was, I don't ever have to take another drink. Now, I didn't know how that was going to work out at that time, but I remember laying down on that dirty, filthy couch going, I don't ever have to drink again. Now imagine my shock when a few days later in our big book study we hit that paragraph I just read. We're found that as soon as we're able to lay aside prejudice, express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commence to get results. I got that result. First day back in AA. Awesome. Next paragraph. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. I don't got to use your God. It says our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient, this is underlinable too, was sufficient to make the approach and effect the contact with Him. As soon as we admit the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe, underlying the totality of things, here's the promise, we begin to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction. Here's the hook. Provided we take other simple steps. They just tell you you're going to get to the power if you take the steps. Guaranteed. There ain't a treatment center out there guaranteeing nothing, folks. They're just saying if you take these steps, you will get to the power. Guaranteed. We found that God does not make too hard of terms with those who seek Him. I got to seek. God ain't lost. I am. You know what I'm saying? I got to seek God. To us, the realm of the Spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. If I'm seeking something, I'm looking. If I am seeking something, I am taking action. It's pretty simple. When, therefore, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies, too, to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. At the start, this is all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to affect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. Afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth. But if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere, so we used our own conception, however limited it was. Later on, they just gave us some conceptions of creative intelligence, spirit of the universe. Later, right in the third set, they talk about God is the Father, we're the children. He's the principal, we're the agent. Conceptions of God. So we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there's a power greater than myself? Here's the promise. As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him he is on his way. It's been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. My cornerstone in the beginning was hope. Hope. That's it. Was my step 2. I had a God in my understanding. God didn't do anything to me. I hope what worked for the old man will work for me. Why? Because I was desperate. That was my cornerstone. If we got any builders in here, what's the most important stone of a building? It's the cornerstone. Why? Because if it ain't plumb and true, the whole building is going to go up crooked. Right? This cornerstone is in place. That was great news for us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it'd work if I could only believe as he believes. But I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. You know, you see that guy or that gal, and like, man, if I could just be them, I could get this thing. I don't have to believe what they believe. I just got to hope. Have my own concept. I mean, I did step 2. We didn't get into some great theological discussion on religion and stuff. Didn't talk about it. And my sponsor says, are you a real alcoholic? And I'm snotting and crying, I'm a real alcoholic. You're screwed. Right? Step 1. Right? John, you think it works for me? Well, Cliff, I know it works for you. Well, do you think it works for Cliff or Myers and Darren and all these other people out there in that church? Well, I know it works for them. You're damn right it works for them. If this program didn't work for them, they'd be playing bingo in this church tonight. How well was it working for you? It ain't. He asked me, what do you have to lose? Except your life. I'm screwed and I hope. Besides the seeming inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. We alcoholics are some sensitive people, man. We try to be tough, but my God, if somebody says something bad about me, I'm crushed. I'm like a little sensitive little flower, you know. Good grief. Get over yourself already. You know, it's like, my God, they don't like me. Are they talking about, my God, unreasoning prejudice. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. It's like the proverbial fingers down the chalkboard. You start talking to me about spiritual things and I went, no. Because in my mind, I tried it. I asked God and He didn't answer. Bristle with antagonism. So look what it says. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. There's another $5 must. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. You want to know why? Because faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. Teddy Roosevelt. Carry a big stick, right? That was alcohol, was the big stick. It beat me into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. You betcha. It's a tedious process. You don't got to go to the lengths that I did, but I had to go to the very end. It was a tedious process. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be as prejudiced for as long as some of us were. The reader may still ask why he should believe in a power greater than themselves. We think there are good reasons. Let us have a look at some of them. The practical individual today is a stickler for facts and results. Right? That's a nice way of saying we got a lot of thinkers today. We got a lot of thinkers that are alcoholics, right? We like facts and figures and we think it through, right? Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly grounded in fact. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Look, I feel pretty darn confident that if we walk over there and flip off the light switch, you know what's going to happen? The lights are going to go off. It's going to happen. Do I know how that works? Nope. But when I was little, I saw my mama or my daddy do that, and the lights came on or off, and it stuck. It works. Do I have to understand electricity? Nope. I just know it works. When we leave here tomorrow, I have faith that Michael's truck is going to start. Do I know how it starts? No. You put the key in, it starts. I've experienced it. I know it to be true. I don't have to understand anything. Simply because it's impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. That was the answer why this acceptance. Everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there is no good evidence. There is good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. Excuse me. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? If a crime got committed out there right now, and we all witnessed it, eyewitnesses, I'd say there's got to be at least 53 different versions, right? Because we all saw something different. We all interpret it in our own ways, right? I mean, they say the visual proof is the weakest proof. You know, my God, we do this all the time. It is being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. To illustrate, the prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. So let's break that down in here. He's saying that this table, this conference table, is a mass of whirling electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. Okay. It's a friggin' table to me. Right? It's a table. That's why we can see it. But we're made of this, right? Why do we do this? Science tells us so. That's what science says. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful, guiding, creative intelligence, right there our perverse streak comes to the surface, and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it isn't so. My sponsor would say at this point, I don't know anybody too stupid to get sober in AA, but I know a whole lot of people who are too damn smart. All right? Because I'm going to try to prove everything, disprove everything. All right? We read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe the universe needs no God to explain it. Were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, proceeds nowhere. That is the opposite of hope. That is anti-hope right there. Because if life means nothing, proceeds nowhere, is going nowhere, then we don't need to be here, folks. We don't need to be here. Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligence agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega. The beginning and end of it all, rather vain of us, wasn't it? So what he's saying is, who's the higher power? Me. Why? Because I'm running the show. Oh, I may believe in God, but who's calling the shots? Me. Why? Because of my intelligence. I, who think so highly of myself. Surely I can beat alcoholism. I'm like the captain of a ship who is repeatedly running his ship aground, busting it up on the rocks. Right? Proving to myself and to others that I cannot captain the ship, yet I'm convinced that I must be the captain of my own ship. We who have traveled this dubious path beg of you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed that spiritual-minded persons of all races and colors and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves. 2 sets of twins below me. They all went to seminary. My sister's married to a preacher, right? They got the God thing. You dig? They get it. They're good people. I mean, my brothers are good men, and they're good to their families, and my sister's kids are the tops. They're great people. Yet when I was drinking, I despised them. You know, they're all at my mama's house having dinner for a holiday. I mean, I missed Christmas 96, 97, 98 because I couldn't get home because I was drunk. You know, and I just despised them because of my prejudice. Did I really despise them? No. I just wanted what they had, and I couldn't get it. That's what he just talked about in that paragraph. I'll cynically dissect because I can't get what they got. Mm-hmm. Where's halfway?
I don't know.
We'll figure it out. Instead, we look at the human defects of these people and sometimes use their shortcomings as a basis for wholesale condemnation. We can do that too, right? Preacher gets in a little trouble. Aha! See? They're all nuts. Priest getting in a little trouble over here. See, I told you they're all sick. Oh, we're good at that. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. Oh, I love that one. People talk of intolerance today. You look out there in the real world, they talk about being intolerant, yet who's intolerant? Them. Oh, it's easy to do, right? We miss the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. In our personal stories, you will find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Right? That's why we're telling the story. Whether we agree with that particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They are questions for each individual to settle for himself. Doesn't matter how you get to the power. I'm happy for you. How I get to the power, I'm going to get to the power my own way, right? It's going to happen. But look what it says. Here's where our cement comes in. On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them, not some of them, not most of them, not the smart ones, not the ones who have, it says every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly possible. As the celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. And we are some worldly folks out there, folks. You talk about being around the block, we have been around the block. You know, we know the block. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain things, take the steps. There has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, and happiness and sense of direction flowed into them. Here's the hook. This happened soon. This ain't the step a month club, folks. You desperate? Well, let's see how desperate you are. Let's get in the steps, right? This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. You're there. I'm there? Okay, I'll pass it off.
All right. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they showed the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. Now, you look at that and it's right back to, did our lives get better once we stopped drinking? How about that? I can hear myself now. I was never told that I was too quiet, so that's all right. You know, and here it is. Leaving aside the drink problem, why is it that life doesn't get better? It says they show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. And faith is a tricky word, and we're about to really start looking into it, but they're about to really beat us up on what is prejudice, what is fixed ideas. Let's take a look at it. This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of the men in those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Take a look at that, and let's see where they go with it. It says some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought a round earth preposterous. Let's look at that story for a second. Columbus convinces the Queen that she needs to fund him because he's convinced he knows of an easier way to get to India, and in order to go east, he's going to go west. Now, there's a good alcoholic. He had to have been. Think about it. There was some con games there and some talking. But he convinced her. But what did most of the people believe as Columbus set sail? Can you imagine? There were people up on the docks going, this silly fool is going to do what? He's going to sail right off the edge of the earth because the world is flat. Now, did these people think this or did they believe it? They believed it in their heart of hearts that this man was going to never return and he was going to sail right off the edge of... Now, they thought that was factual. They believed in their hearts. They had fixed ideas that was the truth. How many times in your life have you had fixed ideas where you swore you knew the truth? And later, something revealed that you didn't know anything. You were as far opposite of what the truth was that you possibly could be. And here it is. It says others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. We asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? And a lot of us come in here with this whole God thing stuck sideways. Whether we believe there's a God or whether we don't believe there's a God. I came in and I wasn't sure. I couldn't prove to you either way, but in my mind, I was convinced that if there was a God, God was going to be done with me, because if I was God, I'd be done with a guy like me. I had a fixed idea that was the truth, and there's no way it could be any different than that. How about that? A prejudice. I think I know something when I really don't know a thing. No facts basing it. Well, let's see where it goes. Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print the account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all their other flights had failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved that man could never fly? Think about that story now. Langley's never did it. All these great minds that were convinced that they could create a flying machine did not work, so all of the mathematical minds joined together and said, this is an impossibility, it cannot happen. We've proven it, it's over, man will never fly. What did the Wright brothers do for a living? Anybody know? They didn't know any better. They were bicycle mechanics. They went, you know what? I think we can build an airplane. Regardless of what everyone else said, in their mind they went, okay, I think it can be done. A remote possibility that we can actually make something fly. And you know what? They were the first in flight, weren't they? How about that? Had not the people said that God had reserved the privilege to the birds, only 30 years later the conquest of air travel was almost an old story and airplane travel was in full swing. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of thinking. I love this part, show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. Think about this. In 1939, let's pull something out that will never happen. So Bill goes, going to the moon. Let's write this down. There's no way that'll ever happen. And I bet we can find somebody who will think, I bet they can do it. We'll find a Wright brother that'll say, I think that could happen. Anybody know when we landed on the moon? Remember? Some of the old, it's a few years, 1969. It wasn't that long after. He's picking up something that was, this will never happen, I'll be darned. 30 years later, here we are on the moon. Amazing. It's a foresight in this is almost amazing. Is it not our age characterized by the ease in which we discard old ideas for new? By the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new that which does? We had to ask ourselves, why shouldn't we apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view? Just maybe if we open our mind up a little bit to this power greater than ourselves, just maybe it could solve our problem. You don't have to believe. It's not a requirement of step 2. It cannot be enforced enough. The belief in God is not a requirement in step 2. All I have to do is be able to pull a just maybe out. It says, we're having I love this. When you walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, was any of this stuff going on in your life? We're having trouble with personal relationships. Yep, there it is. We couldn't control our emotional natures. Now, that didn't mean I was crying all the time. One minute I may be crying, the next minute I might want to take your head off because you looked at me wrong. I'm on an emotional roller coaster. I cannot control my emotional nature. It says, we were prey to misery and depression. Oh, poor me. All over it. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. First time I read that, I'm like, they were following me around, weren't they? Somebody was taking notes. But look at this. Was there not a basic solution to these bedevilments? All of these things. Why is it that our life is so unsatisfactory once we stop drinking? We stop drinking, and this is what happens to us. If you want to know why you get restless, irritable, and discontent, that is driving the bus. That is bringing you right to it. But look at this. Wasn't that a basic solution to these things that are causing our demise more important than whether we should see like the next episode of ER? You want to put it in modern day terms, that's what they're talking about here. Why is it, come on, you need to get working on your 4-step. Yeah, but there's a cowboy game on right now. Think about it. We've got all this stuff happening to us. We're unraveling on the inside. The hole's growing bigger and bigger. Yet my mind comes up with, hey, the game's on at 3. Isn't that more important? I'll get to that stuff later. That's what they're telling us here. Isn't it more important that we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, and the biggest question you have to ask yourself is, how well has your way worked out for you up to this point? My sponsor looked at me. So how's it working out for you? I'm on a green vinyl mat on a linoleum floor that has stuff on it that God only knows what it is. All my belongings were inside a Tom Thumb plastic bag. Everything that I had in my possession, and most of those possessions were not mine. Some of you may understand that. I'm 35 years old, and he asked me, how well is this working out for you? And the fact of the matter is, my ideas did not work. Like John said, I'm the captain of my ship, running it aground every time. Give me the wheel, I've got it this time. Right back into the rocks. But here it is. But the God idea did. The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which could fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems, when others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them. We began to feel like those who had insisted the Wrights would never fly. Logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. We're some thinkers. Love to think. Let's think and talk about it. It says, I love this. This one, let's see here. It is not by chance we are given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with the proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it is more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said we don't know. When we became alcoholics crushed by a self-imposed crisis, how about that? No one else did it. We did it. We could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or He is nothing. You know, God either is or He isn't. What is our choice to be? It's pretty simple. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. And here we are, back at that faith word again. It says we couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason towards a desired shore of faith. And look how bridge of reason is, have you ever noticed? It's capitalized. What was our higher power for years? My thinking. My bridge of reason. That was my higher power. You ever notice how Bill capitalized that for a reason? Think about it. I said it. The outline and the promises of the new land have brought us to the luster of tired eyes and fresh courage of flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. Here's the AAers. We were grateful that reason, here it is again, capitalized, our higher power, had brought us so far. But somehow we could not quite step ashore. Perhaps we have been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. And that is the hardest thing is taking that step of faith, taking that walk over and going, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't believe it's going to work. I hope it is. And taking that leap of faith. That was natural, but let us look at it closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? It says, for did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we have been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. And I'll never forget, I looked at my sponsor and I'm like, I just don't think I'm capable of having faith. I just don't think I've got it. I wish I had what you had, but I just don't think I'm capable. I've tried, I've been dipped, I've been dunked, I've been all these things, somehow trying to get there, but I just couldn't get there. And he's like, hold on. But look where it goes. We found, too, that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental gooseflesh that used to bring on. Have we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? Isn't that a faith of some sort? And then, with a better motive, have we not worshipfully beheld a sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us have not loved something or somebody? The ability to love, does that not take faith? How about that? How much do these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Kind of takes the thinking right out of it, doesn't it? Little or nothing we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. So if you think you don't have faith, let me lay something out there for you. Have you ever called a liquor store to see if they still had liquor before you went to the liquor store? What a thought. I just went there. I had absolute faith they were going to have a whole row of whiskeys, and I could pick whatever I wanted off that shelf. It was going to be there. I had faith. It's like walking up to a light switch when you wake up in the morning and you're turning it on. Do you ever doubt that the lights are coming on? Well, there's another game you can play when you don't pay your electric bill. That's kind of, you wonder if they're going to come on. Some of you may understand that statement. It's an interesting game to play, isn't it? It's like Russian roulette. Sooner or later, that light isn't going on. But you know what? We walk up to a light switch and we flip it and we don't even think about it. I have faith that that light is going to go on. I am capable of faith. I just don't realize it. And that's what they're telling us. Imagine life without faith, where nothing was left but pure reason. It wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you could prove a straight line be the shortest distance between 2 points, yet there it is. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling onto a destiny of nothingness? And I was one of those people that believed it. For a while, I assumed that, you know what, this life had no meaning, no direction. We were just an accident spinning out of control. And think about it. What an ugly thought that is. When you sit down and look at that, God, there seems to be way too many things going on that prove that that's so inaccurate. But we get so caught up in thinking that I know better. It says, of course we could. The electrons themselves seem to be more intelligent than that, at least so the chemist said. Hence we saw reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanate out of our best minds. What about the people who could prove man could never fly? It's like me trying to convince my mind that she's sleeping around on me. My greatest reason, I ever made that mistake before. I'm convinced you're cheating on me. I swear to God. So what do? My reason comes up with, well, you better go cheat on her. You know, my mind comes up with the wildest things. You know, my reason is just not so reliable. Yet we have been seeing another kind of flight of spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but liked to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Cynically dissecting it. Looking at people saying, guess what? I found a power and it's solving my problems. And I sit back and go, let me find some flaws in it. Cynically dies. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Think about that statement. I could have swore, I walked around for years, I just got to find God. Finally, someone told me God doesn't need a map. He's not lost. You know, and I've talked to a lot of men that have said, you know what? I just don't believe in God. I don't think there is a God. And there's an easy way to prove them wrong. Think about it. Have you ever been in a situation you could not get yourself out of? Everyone around you could not get you out of this situation. I'll never forget, I'm sitting in front of a judge. It wasn't Baraka, but it was someone as bad as Baraka. And I'm looking at this judge, and he was wore out, and he had seen enough of me. And I saw that look in the eye of a judge before, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. And I'm looking over at my court-appointed attorney, and he looked like he was about 15 years younger than me. I couldn't believe he was a lawyer yet, and I'm like, this isn't good. He had that deer in the headlights of a pickup truck looking, and I'm like, oh no. And I knew I couldn't talk my way out of this thing. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, uh-oh. I'm screwed. And you know what I did next? Anybody ever done one of these? One of those little timeouts, you know? Hey, hold on a second, I'll give you right back. God, if you get me out of this, I will do anything. Anybody ever done that before? See, I asked this question. I've probably asked this question to over, 2,000-3,000 people now, because I want to find you. Has anybody never done that? I want to find that person, because think about it, they're going to be the most self-sufficient person you have ever met in your life. Each and every one of us, when caught in a position, where do we go? It's like a knee-jerk reaction. God, get me out of this, I'll do anything. And the thing you have to look at is, who taught you how to do that? It's an interesting thought, isn't it? It came to me one night, we were in a meeting, and I brought this up, and I went, no one pulled me aside when I was like 5 years old, and they said, when the proverbial crap hits the fan, and things aren't looking really good, here's what you do. Do a timeout and say it out loud, say it to yourself, look up, look down, but say this, God, get me out of this, I'll do anything. No one had to teach me how to do that. See, it was there all along. It was in us all along, and they told us right here in the book, for deep down in every man, woman, and child, the fundamental idea of God is there. It's promised. Your past will prove it to you. It may be so obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or another it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves, in a miraculous demonstration of that power in human lives, are as facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was part of our makeup. How about that? We just proved it. It's simple. We had our own conception of God, however limited it was. We all had one right then and there. It says sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but He was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it was only there. He may be found, and is so with us. There's a little story about God was trying to figure out where to hide himself. Anybody ever heard that one? And they're going through all the places, and they're going, oh, man will find you there, man will find you there. And all of a sudden he's like, I know where I'm going to go. I'm going to put myself right here in each and every one of them, and they'll never know to look. And how fitting it is. He was there all along. We don't have to look for God. All we have to do is turn around and open our eyes. He's been there all along. Let's face it, none of us are that lucky. Most of us shouldn't even have a heartbeat right now. If God wasn't involved, I mean, do you really think you're that lucky is why you're still alive today? There must be a purpose to this. It says we can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself, then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. Somebody underline this, Larry. Here's one for you. Here's a promise you can take to the bank. With this attitude, you cannot fail. That is a bold statement, isn't it? With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. In this book, you'll read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. His story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. Our friend was a minister's son, and if you go back, it's, I believe, our Southern friend in the 3rd edition. Bear with me, I don't know if he's still in the 4th edition or not. But here we go. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school, where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble, frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Let's see here. Post-war delusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. Things aren't going well for this guy at all. One night when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, He certainly hasn't done anything for me." Can anyone relate to that statement? Oh, do I have the hat and T-shirt for that moment. Man, but later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? Is it possible that all those people are just dead wrong? It says, while pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God? Ooh, deep question, isn't it? It's one we all have to look at, don't we? This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed onto his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of an infinite power and love. He stepped from bridge to shore. He made that leap of faith. How about that? For the first time, he lived in the conscious companion with his Creator. Thus, our friend's cornerstone was fixed in place. No later vicissitude had shaken it. His alcoholic problem was taken away. That very night years ago, it disappeared. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink had never returned. And at such times, a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he would. God had restored his sanity. Isn't that the hope of step 2? came to believe in a power greater than ourselves, which will restore us to sanity. How about that? What was this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe, and he had some circumstances, didn't he? He humbly offered himself to his Maker, then he knew. Even so has God restored us all to our right minds. Not just some of us, all. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly. But he has come to all who have honestly sought him. When we drew near to him and he disclosed himself to us. How about that?
Very good. All right, we'll break for dinner. Thanks. Now, because we're getting into the meat of things right here. This is how it works. This is all the nuts and bolts right here. And if you thought we were fired up before, wait till you. I love this stuff.
I think that's what a lot of them thought of. That's why they all disappeared.
They left. Well, shame on them. You have my permission to call them middle of the rotor when they show up tomorrow, okay? All right, here we go. Chapter 5, how it works. And if you think about this, I mean, how many groups, it's got to be at least in the high 90% of all the groups everywhere read this at every meeting, right? You could probably, I mean, lots of, or at least in Texas, everywhere you go, they open with their meeting like this, right? And we could quote this. But it was until I got sober and my sponsor, we went through and we broke it down. And I was like, wow, I didn't know there was so much information in this stuff right here, what we always read. So check this out. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Well, you go back to the statistics they had, the old-timey groups that they had where they were doing anywhere from 50 to 75% to 90%. That's a true statement. Rarely did they see anyone fail who thoroughly followed this path. True statement today. Rarely hey, all the guys that I sponsored that thoroughly follow this path, they are sober today. Every single one of them. The guys who didn't thoroughly follow the path, all bets are off. We can twist that sentence around and say, rarely have I seen anyone thoroughly follow this path. Because they got their own ideas, they got their own way of doing things. Well, I'm going to do this. They don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to get into the steps, whatever. But it's a true statement. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. All right? Whole lot of information there. They describe these people who don't recover. Cannots and will nots. Right? I don't know many cannots. Like I told you before, I've never met anybody, I haven't sponsored anybody that was too dumb to get sober. I've sponsored a whole lot of people, or tried to, that were too damn smart. You know, but there is that class of people that cannot get sober. They've developed wet brain or whatnot, you know, and they can't get it. Constitutionally incapable, right? And look what it says of being honest with themselves. And there's a couple ways to look at it, but the way I look at it is this. Here is a prescription for a miracle, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, to get me from a hopeless state of mind and body to the power. Today, just like it was way back when I got sober, if I am being honest with myself, I will do whatever it takes today to follow these principles. That is being honest with myself. I wake up tomorrow and I choose not to call my sponsor. I choose not to make an amends. I choose not to do a 10-step. I choose not to pray and meditate. I choose not to practice these principles. I'm basically looking up at the big guy saying, thank you, I got it from here. I'm not being honest with myself. Because here is the prescription right here. If I'm being honest, I will follow these directions. If I choose not to follow these directions, I'm not being honest with myself because I'm telling myself, I got this thing whooped. It says there are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. If you follow these principles to the best of your ability, it will demand rigorous honesty. You know, and we'll get into that as we get into the steps, but there's lots of things. You know, it tells us that we let God discipline us in the way that we have just outlined. How did they just outline? They just outlined the steps, right? It says their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Thank God for that statement, right? It says, our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. You get asked to speak before a group, that's how you do your story. What am I supposed to tell them? What I used to be like, what happened to me, what I'm like now. Bill did a masterful job in doing his story. He did it just like that. Right? And that's what our stories disclose. Why? For the identification. So A, the alcoholic can identify with us, say, hey, I'm one of those too, and get some hope. Right? You can underline this, Larry, because here's a qualification. I'm not picking on Larry. He asked me to point some things out, so I'm following orders, okay? But here's a qualification right here. It says, if you've decided you want what we have, and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take the steps. Oh, I wanted what you had in 1998 or 97 or 96, but I wasn't willing to do a damn thing about it. I wanted to slide into AA because I earned my seat and I guess get sober by osmosis. I wasn't willing to do anything about it. I wasn't willing to crack open this book. I wasn't willing to get a sponsor. I wasn't willing to do anything. This says, if you want what I got and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take the steps. At some of these we balked. You betcha. I got to do what? An inventory? I got to make amends to who? At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. What are some of those easier, softer ways? How about that little trend in AA today? How about just auditing meetings? Going from meeting to meeting to meeting. There's a whole host of people in AA today that don't even have a home group. They go to this group for a while, and they go over here for a while. They do this over here for a while, right? They don't got a sponsor. They're not accountable to anyone. No one gets to know them. That's an easier, softer way. How about just not working the steps? How about lying your way through the steps? How about keeping some stuff back in the steps, right? It says, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. I got to let go. Got to let go of what I think is right, what I think should happen, hell, the writing was on the wall. Me running the show was going to kill me. I had to let go. There was nothing else, right? Remember that we deal with alcohol. Cunning, baffling, powerful. Cunning. Lying in wait to ensnare. Alcohol just hanging. Just waiting just lurking in the bushes. Just waiting, patiently. Waiting for me to slip up. Alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. Without help it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God, and may you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. Half don't get you half in AA. That's been my experience. I know some of you may have skated through your schooling and gotten C's and stuff. Can't get a C in AA. I got to go for broke. Half doesn't get me half in AA. Half gets me drunk. We stood at the turning point. What is the turning point? Well, up until this point of the book, what have I come to? I've come to two conclusions so far in this book. I am screwed in step one. I'm a hopeless, helpless alcoholic. I hope what worked for you will work for me. Two conclusions, right? That's all I've done to this point. I'm screwed and I hope. Now I'm at the fork in the road. I'm at the turning point. I'm either A, going to take this road and do what I always do, drink to the bitter end, or B, I'm going to take the other fork in the road and I'm going to make a commitment in step 3 to take these steps. That is the turning point. We stood at the turning point. I love this prayer. I call this the mother of all prayers right here. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. I think Earl Hightower calls it, it's like, that little AA is on the cliff and he sees all the sober AAs at the bottom of the cliff and wonders how they got there. They must have found a safe way down. No. They got to run and start and lead. I got to ask his protection and care with complete abandon. I don't know how it's going to work out, but I know me running the show is not going to work out. It says, here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. All right, and we got the 12 steps, and I'm going to flip the page. It says, many of us exclaimed, what an order, I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. Right? We're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. It's guaranteed. We're humans. We're going to screw up at times, right? It says we're not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. And here we got the ABCs. A perfect recap of steps 1 and 2. A, that we're alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. Check. I got that one. B, that probably no human power could have relieved my alcoholism. My mama pleading with me didn't fix it. Those girlfriends pleading with me didn't fix it. Those psychiatrists didn't fix it. That judge threatening me didn't fix it. I am beyond human aid. C, that God could and would if he were sought. I didn't know much about God, but it worked for the old man, and I hope it worked for me. It's pretty simple. Too simple for us smart folks sometimes, right? It says, being convinced of that, we're now at step 3, which is that we decide to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. If I knew how to turn my will and life over to the care of God, I would have done that a long time ago. I got no clue on how to do that. Just what do we mean by that? The next couple of pages. And just what do we do? The rest of the book till page 164. The steps are going to show us how to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. You've heard people right in a meeting. What step are you on? Oh, I'm just turning it over today. I'm just turning it over, right? I don't know how to turn it over. I just know how to work the steps. Take the steps. If I take the steps, I'll turn it over. It says the first, now Bill's good. I love this stuff because Bill's great at using analogies, right? And this is great stuff because he's going to tell us about us. He says the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Those were my sponsor's question. How well was it working for you? It wasn't. It says on that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Now here comes the analogy. He says each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show. He's saying that an alcoholic is like an actor who wants to direct the movie. It's like they're shooting Martin Scorsese's in Pratt, Kansas doing a film, right? And you get a little bit part. You got 2 lines in the whole friggin' movie, right? And you know your lines too. You show up the first day of filming, right? And all of a sudden you go up to Scorsese. Hey, Marty, I've been thinking about my lines, and I think I need to like ad lib a little bit here. And you know what? This makeup is not really working. And maybe if you just like tone these lights down and put this, I'm like an actor who wants to direct a movie. I'm trying to arrange everything in my life to suit me. It's forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, the rest of his players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Now here's some arrogance coming. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. That's my illusion. I'm trying to arrange everything in my life. If she would just get off my back. If I could just get that promotion, if I could just get the law off my back, if I could just finish my college, if I could just do all these things and you guys would get on board and do it my way, not only will I be very, very happy, so will you too. Well, that's kind of arrogant, don't you think? You don't need me bossing you around. We're going to find out what happens when we do that. But it says, in trying to make these arrangements, our actor may be sometimes quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. Hey, I'm going to try what works. If I need to get my way and I need you to come along with my way, I can do a lot of things, man. I can pay you some compliments, wink at you, do whatever I need to do to get my way, right? And if that don't work, screw you. Because I'm going to get what I need to get. So whatever works. If the nice don't work, then I can be a jerk. So what happens? The show doesn't go off very well. No, it doesn't. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. Poor me. He decides to exert himself even more. So it's not going my way. So what am I doing? I throw more me at the problem. I'm running the show. It ain't going my way. And I throw more me at the problem. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious as the case may be. Still, the play doesn't suit him. It ain't ever enough. It's never enough. Have you ever been in a position where you had the job, you had the relationship, you had the car, you had everything in a row, and you know what? When I got all those things, it still wasn't enough. I had to have more. I was never, ever satisfied. Maladjusted to life, I think was what they call that. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. Sometimes I'll take the blame. I can assure you when I take the blame, when I walk away from that situation, it's still your fault. I'm just taking the blame to get the heat off, right? He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker when even trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only he manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Right? So I'm under this illusion that I can wrest satisfaction if I manage everything well and you'll do it my way. And I eventually piss you off. You take some recriminatory action against me, and now I hate you. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense to me. Is he not even in his best moments a producer of confusion rather than harmony? We call that drama today. Drama. It's just constant drama. Oh, sorry, boss, I couldn't make it to work. I had a flat tire. This is like how many tires you got on that car? You've had 43 flat tires in a row. It's just confusion rather than harmony. All the relationships are in shambles. All this is in shambles. It's crazy time. Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people call it nowadays. He's like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. The retired businessman who's got everything he wants, except he's going to bitch about everything else. The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Politicians and reformers who were sure that all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. The outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him. Oh, yeah. And the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, our self-pity. I'm thinking about me. So that was all kind of flowery language for Bill. Now he just cuts right to the chase. He hits us right between the eyes with this. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. A book on alcoholism, and they're telling me my problem ain't alcohol, my problem is selfishness. Pretty interesting. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Fear, selfish. You ever been so locked in on fear that you can't even see straight? Everybody around you is having a good time and you're so fearful about that relationship or so fearful about that job or whatever it is that's looming large, you can't even freaking get out of it, right? Let me ask you, who were you thinking of? Self. Huh. Self-delusion, self-seeking, that's a fun one. My sponsor loves picking out those self-seeking things, I try to do something, or I think I'm doing something nice for somebody, but when it turns out I really wasn't doing anything nice, I was just doing something nice so Michael would see me and think I was a good guy, self-seeking, We're at this treatment center and this guy raised his hand and he goes, on my way to treatment here, the lady had a flat tire and I helped her. That's not selfish. And my buddy Kurt goes, BS. He goes, you was totally self-seeking. Guy's like, what do you mean? He goes, dude, you didn't help her to help her. You helped her so you could get a date with her or get a $20 bill, but you weren't helping her to just be kind. You wanted something in return. Self-seeking. Kind of tricky. And it says, we step on the toes of our fellows, they retaliate. You betcha. You don't need me bossing you around. Eventually, you're going to be at the breaking point. You're going to take some action against me. Like I said, I hate you now. I hated a lot of people back then. But here's some good stuff. It says, sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. But we invariably find some point in the past we've made decisions based on self which later places us in a position to be hurt. And that's kind of tricky. I had one of those. One that came to mind right off the bat. In the middle of the night, it's on a Sunday night, Monday morning, right? Like 3 o'clock in the morning. I had gone down I live in Plano. I went down to South Dallas to meet a friend. Right?
3 in the morning.
On the way back, I'm going through an intersection, and this lady ran the stop sign at the intersection and hit my car, totaled my car. This lady was from like Guatemala or something, illegal alien, didn't have insurance, totaled my car. I hated her because I had to put it on my insurance. It was a mess. I mean, I hate this woman. I tried to get her deported, you name it, right? And I tell my sponsor about this. And he goes, well, back up a minute. You had a job at the time, right? And I said, yeah. He said, well, when did you work? I was like, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. He goes, you're out in the 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning. What were you doing down in that part of Dallas? Well, I met a friend. Well, what kind of friend was it? Well, see, I had this little pharmaceutical business I had going, right? And I was trading this guy some ecstasy for some cocaine, right? Outside issue stuff, right? He goes, huh? He goes, if I remember correctly, those things are illegal. I said, well, yeah. So you were out breaking the law. Well, yeah. Huh. So you were breaking the law, putting other people in danger so you could get other stuff. He goes, that ain't that lady's fault. Yeah, she should have insurance. We should all have insurance. But you know what, big boy, you put yourself in that intersection. Because if you would have been home like a normal person, you wouldn't have been there. And I was like, son of a gun. I placed myself in a position to be hurt. You know? I had another girlfriend that cheated on me all the time, and I kept going back to her. I could swear it was her fault. He's like, who held a gun to your head, dude? I was like, good God. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. They all see it, I don't. Now, for all you people that sit in discussion meetings and you chant the mantra, there's no muss in the big buck. Here's 2 musts, followed by a promise that'll kill you. And if you got a problem with it, contact the author. Because here's what it says. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And you can take that any way you want to take it. How is selfishness going to kill me? Selfishness, fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. Right? That stuff on page 52. Can't control my emotional natures. I'm full of fear. I'm unhappy. Can't seem to be of real help to other people. Self, 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 self. I feel that way long enough, and I'm so miserable. That hole inside of me keeps growing. I get so miserable. My mind comes up with the brilliant solution. Let's drink. Page 24 says, a week or a month after my last drink, I am unable to remember how bad it was. So if this selfishness is kicking my butt, this spiritual malady, that mental obsession is in play. I'm going to drink. And for me to drink is to die because I've lost control and drinking will kill me. That's how selfishness kills. And it says there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. I can't fix my selfishness. That's just throwing more me at the problem. I can't do it. I got to have help. This is the how and the why of it. First of all, I had to quit playing God. Who was calling the shots in my life? Oh, we may believe in the power of it in ourselves, but who was calling the shots? I was. How did it work out for me? It wasn't. I had to quit playing God. Why? It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God is going to be the director. You need the concept for God? There you go. God's the director, you're the actor. You know? He's the principal, we are his agents. He's the father, we're his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was a keystone of a new and triumphant arch to which we pass to freedom. Look at that word freedom. Out of all those years of me trying to get sober, out of all those desire chips and those 30-day chips and those 60-day chips, I was never, ever free. Booze owned me. Because I was going through the day thinking about not drinking. This is talking about freedom. Pretty cool stuff. Look at the middle of page 63, and there's a third step prayer. I'm going out of order, but I got a reason. Here's in the middle of the page. Here's the prayer. It says, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, right? Fear, selfishness, dishonesty, and all that stuff. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness of those I would help of thy power, thy love, thy way of life, may I do thy will always. Exclamation point. All right? That's the third step prayer. I've done it several times in AA before. So I got my last desire chip on a Tuesday, September 4th. That Saturday, I'm at my sponsor's house. I've been at my meeting, the meetings we've had during that week. I've showed up at the treatment center. I've read the stuff he's asked me to read. I show up to his house on a Saturday morning, and we go over the doctor's opinion again. We skim through We Agnostics. He's asking me questions along the way, and we get right here. Big boy, are you ready to do this work? And I said, Cliff, I'll do anything. And he says, well, we'll see about that. And he said, come on. You know? And he'd given me a big book that day, and he goes, we're going to go pray. We're on my prayer bench, right? And so I'm following the old man through his house, and we go into the living room where nobody goes. And there's a coffee table. It wasn't a prayer bench, but I pick your battles, you know. He wants to call it a prayer bench, that's fine. So we get on our knees, and we open the book to this page, right? And I'm still shaking. I mean, I'm hurting alcoholically, you know. I'm still shaking and vibrating and stuff. And we put our arms around each other, and he says, before you do the prayer, he goes, I'm going to say a prayer and make sure God's with us. And then you can do your third step prayer. And I said, okay. And I bowed my heads, and I got my arms around the old man. And he starts praying. I have no earthly idea what he says. Because in my head, I am praying my ass off. And I guess he quit praying, and there was some silence there. And he's like, I need to hear what you're saying to God. And now I'm on the spot, you know. And I said, you know, try not to cry. You know, dear God, I've tried to get sober since 1988, and I'm scared. And I don't want to die drunk. I need your help. Please give me the willingness to do whatever I got to do to get what's in this book. Amen. And he said, stand up. And he gave me a hug. And he says, you just did the third step prayer. Look at the top of that page. I love this page. When I first got sober, I swear every Friday night in Homeward Bound I had to read page 63. You know, guys would come in, they'd get out of treatment. Hey, you still reading page 63? Yeah, that's what I do, man. I love this page. But look at these promises. This is huge stuff right here. When we sincerely take such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We got a new employer. There's another concept of God. Notice how employers capitalize. God's the employer. I'm just the employee. The employee gets his directions from God. We have a new employer. Being all-powerful, he provided what we needed, comma, here's the hook, if we kept close to him and performed his work well. My sponsor said, underline that. I underlined it. He says, there's your job description till the day you die. What's my job description? My job today, just as it was then, is to stay close to God, perform his work well. I've since added on to that for my guys. My job today is to stay close to God, perform his work well today, no matter what. No matter what happens. That's my job. What does it say? What's the promise? It says God's going to provide me with what I need. And Cliff said, if God's providing you with what you need, John, what else do you need? Nothing. He says, pretty simple, ain't it? It's like, wow. You know, this is good stuff, right? Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. I spent 10 years going to AA. I wasn't trying to give anything back to AA. I was trying to suck whatever I could out of you so I didn't have to drink that day. Now it's saying I got a primary purpose. My primary purpose is not to get from AA, is to give back to AA. Wow, what a change. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, the hereafter. We are reborn. And Cliff said, welcome, buddy. You get a do-over. You're in the bonus round. Because left to your own devices, you would have woke up with a bottle of vodka next to your head. And now you're in the bonus round. I love that stuff. Look at the end of the, I already did the third step prayer, but look right after the prayer where the exclamation point is. I don't know why they put it afterwards, but it says, we thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready.
It's a trick.
It is a trick. It's like, oh, we've already done the prayer. Now they tell me I got to be sure. I got a note in my book, and I wrote it. It's September the 9th, 1999. Dear John, you're never going to have your way again as long as you live. Love, God. P.S. If you follow the directions in this book, you'll thank me for it one day at a time. My sponsor says, you ain't never going to have your way again. Wow. It says, we found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. Right? So they're giving us, you got to remember, when the book came out in 1939, there wasn't sponsors all over the world. So they got to lay out the precise instructions on how to do these steps. AA came to Texas. You know how I got to Texas? Was it Larry Jewell? Mailed off for a book. He had a book. That's how he went through, or the lady went through the book when she had the steps. I forget. We can edit that out, right, Steve? Right? So they're giving us some instruction. He goes, the wording was, of course, quite optional so long as we express the idea of voicing it without reservation. So if any of you guys have gone through and read the history of the archive stuff and these letters from Dr. Jung to Bill and Bill to Silkworth and all that stuff, one of the key components of having a spiritual experience is this complete and absolute surrender. No lurking notion. Can't get to the spiritual experience if you hadn't conceded. Can't happen. Right? So it's pretty cool. He says, this was only a beginning. It's only a beginning. I've just made a commitment in step 3 with my sponsor and the God of my understanding that I'm going to get off my butt and work these steps. That's what step 3 is about. Think about it. Last time you were drinking and sitting on your sofa and you needed more booze, you made the decision to go to the liquor store. Did the booze just arrive? No. You had to follow it up by strenuous action, correct? The third step has nothing to offer if I don't get off my butt and do a 4th step. Nothing. The big book, as we said in the foreword to the first edition, inside this big book is the precise instructions on how to recover. The big book, right here where I'm getting ready to read, it tells you exactly, precisely when you begin your 4th step. Look at the next paragraph. Or let me finish that one paragraph. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made in effect, sometimes a very great one was felt at once. I felt a huge effect on my 3rd step. I've had guys cry during the 3rd step. Some guys feel a little bit of the awakening, and then it hits them a day or 2 or a week or 3 later. But sometimes it'll bring you to tears. Some powerful stuff here. But look what it says. And Michael's going to cover this, but I gotta, because this is so confusing in AA today. Look at that next line. It says, next, we launch on a course of vigorous action. I just did a 3rd step. I just got up off with my knees. My sponsor has given me a hug. And you know what we did? He said, follow me. And we walked back into his office in his house. He sat me down, and he gave me my instructions for my 4th step. Next. Right? Where's the gray area in next? Bill's a smart guy. We've got to admit. If he would have meant next month, he would have wrote next month. If he would have meant next, well, after you get your job, your wife, and your car back. He said next. Put it another way. Remember getting paid on a Friday? And it seemed like everybody in your little town is at the friggin' bank, and you're in the teller line, and you're waiting, and you're shuffling up there, right? And finally, you're the person in line, right? And the next available teller goes, next. What did you do? You went right to the teller, right? Because you got to get the money. You got Christmas shopping to do. You didn't wait. You didn't wait for an epiphany. No, they called your name. Go. Next means next. That's what I'll end it with there.
That was new. I hadn't heard that yet. But we look at this, but people will contend. Well, let's go back and what it said. These steps are just suggestions. That's all they are. It's a suggested prayer. You look at how it works. How did they word it? Here are the steps we took which are suggested as a program of recovery. Well, that next is just a suggestion, right? Well, let's look at it for a second. Has anybody ever been skydiving before? Jumped out of a perfectly good airplane? All right, we've got a winner. All right, let's look at this for a second. Let's educate some people in this room that have never done it before. As you strap a parachute on and you take a flight up, guess what the guy says? All right, next, we're ready to go. And you know what he says? Ready, set, jump. And you know what he says? They tell you before you jump out of a perfectly good airplane? Once you jump, you do count, and they suggest you pull the ripcord. It is an option. You don't have to pull it. It's up to you. Right? They do highly suggest, though, if you want to live, you follow their suggestions. Once it was put that way to me, I fully understood what they mean by saying, if you want to live and you're dying from this, you're going to follow the instructions. We suggest you follow the instructions. It's too simple. Oh my. Lack of power, that is our dilemma. In so many ways. But here we are. Step one. We formed a conclusion. The problem. Am I or am I not an alcoholic? Step two. I hope this thing works. I see it works in others. It worked for the first 100. I hope this works. Step three. I'm not turning anything over. John touched on it. I'm making a commitment up to God and to my sponsor that I am going to work steps 4 through 12, which will show me how to turn my will and my life, my thoughts and my actions, over to this God of my own understanding, which will restore me to sanity. This is too simple. But have we done anything up to this point? How many decisions have you made in the last 48 hours that weren't followed by action? We make a lot of decisions during the day. Do we follow through with all of them? No. See, the only way we can follow through is follow the precise instructions. Then we come out of our third step and it says next we launch out on a course of vigorous action. John touched on it. When I wanted a drink, I launched out on a course of vigorous action. I went to the liquor store. It's as simple as that. How am I going to back up my third step? It says next I'm going to launch out on a course of vigorous action. The first step, which is the personal house cleaning. Wait a second. What step are we on right now? What did it just say?
First step.
See, the one thing we have to pay attention to this fourth step, this is the first time that Alcoholics Anonymous is going to ask you to do something. This is the first action step that is going to require action on your part without anybody else in the middle of it. This isn't talking about it. This is about doing it. And look how it describes it. The first step, this vigorous action, the first step, which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. We definitely have never attempted our own personal house cleaning, but we have attempted personal house cleaning. It just wasn't ours. I'm all about cleaning your side of the street. You ought to be doing this. I was wonderful at giving you advice. I was wonderful at taking your inventory. But when it came to mine, it says many of us have never attempted. It says, though our decision was a vital and crucial step, that step 3 decision, that commitment, is vital, life-giving. Without it, we're not there. It says it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. What are they talking about? Strenuous effort. Next, I'm going to launch out on a course of vigorous action, which is going to be a strenuous effort to do a personal inventory. That's how I'm going to back up that vital decision in step 3. So we had to get down to causes and conditions. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. I can't tell you how many years I sat in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and this 4th step was talked about as if it was a big, bad, ugly beast that should be locked in that closet, and you better be careful when you bring that thing out. I mean, I saw the people. Someone would walk up, so what step are you working on, John? And John would go, I'm working on step 4, and you could just see the look on their face. You're waiting for them to send them a sympathy card. Like it was something, it was like pulling teeth out of your head. And that isn't what this thing's about. You know, if you look at step 4 back on page 59, it said we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. I've got to understand what that means. Because I don't know about you, but the first time I looked at that, there was a word that jumped out that scared me. What was that? Moral. You know what's really interesting? That isn't the word I saw, though. No. What it translated in my head, just like step 2, I thought step 2 said I had to believe in a power greater than myself which restores to sanity. But it didn't read that. It says we're going to come to believe. But I thought it said I had to believe just by me looking at it. I thought step 3 said we need to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood Him. No, it said we made a decision. When I got to step 4, what I saw in my mind, how it translated was we made a searching and fearless immoral inventory of ourselves. Did anybody else have that go through their mind? Oh, you want to know about all of that I don't want to ever talk about. Those skeletons that I have neatly buried in I didn't understand what they meant. So they're going to tell us. Bill knew it, and he lays it out for us. It says, a business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. We have to admit. A little convenience store down the street, if he doesn't take an inventory, what's going to happen to him? If he doesn't take a regular inventory, is he going to be in business very long? Especially not in a small town, is he? No doubt about it. I mean, you better have stuff that people want, otherwise you're going to have a bunch of stuff that people don't want. And if people don't want it, how long are you going to be in business? You're not. See, we all understand the concept of an inventory. And that's what we're going to do. It says taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. So I have to understand what that means. So let's say I do own that little convenience store, and let's say I've got a little corner devoted to just bread. Let's make this thing simple. And every Monday, I come in Monday morning, and I take my inventory, and I'm going through my bread aisle. Do I need to order bread today? And I look on my shelves, and I've got bread. Don't need to order bread today. Next week, I'll check it again and see what happens. So the week after goes by, and I walk up in Monday morning, and I start going through my inventory, and I get to the bread section, and I look, and I'm like, I got bread. I don't need to order bread today. Anybody going? See, what I'm doing is a one-part inventory. Think about it. The searching part is the fact-finding. Do I have bread? The fearless part of it is the fact-facing part of it. If I go there the following Monday, 3 weeks into this deal, and I look up on my shelf and I go, I got bread, what do I really have? I no longer have a convenience store, I have a pharmacy with a lot of penicillin. That's what I have, right? I no longer have bread, I have the start of penicillin. I've got a bunch of mold spores growing, and no one's going to buy it. See, without doing both sides of that inventory, the searching and fearless, the fact-finding and the fact-facing, I've got to understand, yes, I have bread, but why have I not ordered bread in the last 3 months? I can't fool myself about values of this bread. So let's look at what it says. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. What is the truth about my bread on my shelves? I must be ordering bread that nobody wants, or my bread is too high priced. I have to find out the truth about what's really going on. If you ever pull out a 1939 dictionary, you know what one of the definitions of moral is? I'll be darned. Truth. How about that? Dictionary's pretty helpful in this thing. I've got to understand the truth. It says one object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods to get rid of them promptly without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. It says we did the exact same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. If you want to know what a searching and fearless moral inventory is, it's a fact-finding, a fact-facing, truthful, honest inventory about what's on your shelves of your life today. That's too simple, isn't it? And let's face it, our shelves are full. Have you ever wondered why we got here so exhausted? I don't know about you, but I've been carrying stuff around for a lot of years. My shelves are full. And all we're going to do is find out what's on the shelves of Michael Kelly's life as I walked into AA the first time. What's the truth about all this stuff? It says, we took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Here's a bold statement. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. I would have swore that alcohol destroys more alcoholics than anything else. And we know that Bill, in the first 100, wrote precisely what they meant to convey to you. There was no shades of gray. It was a masterpiece of the English language. And they're telling you resentments are going to destroy an alcoholic more than anything else. Take that to the bank. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we've not only been mentally and physically ill, but we have been spiritually sick. You notice when the spiritual side comes in, so often we want to do a 12-step call and we want to talk about the 3-part of illness to a newcomer. And if you look at old-time AA, they dwelled on the malady of the body and the malady of the mind. And you know where they introduced the spiritual malady? The spiritual illness? As they were starting to walk through the 4-step. It's kind of interesting. They placed it there for a reason. Sometimes we get a little twisted around and we want to hammer that spiritual malady, and old school AA did not do that. This is when they first introduced it to someone. What is that spiritual malady? Well, let's go back to page 52 and look in the middle of it. We were having problems with what? Our personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional nature. We were prey to misery and depression. We had that feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. If you ever wonder what that spiritual malady is, that is it. That's what's driving that obsession for us to pick up that drink one more time. Now that we understand that, let's see what they introduce here. When this spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. How often have we got the cart before the horse in this game? I don't know about you, but the last thing I worried about was the page 52 stuff. I wanted to get my eyeballs going the right direction. I wanted to be able to walk around and not shake like a leaf on a tree, get my body back to health, get me on solid foods again. Then I wanted to be able to complete sentences one more time in my life. I get my mind back functioning again. And then, you know what, when I get time, I'll get back to that page 52 stuff that's kicking my butt. And have you noticed, they tell us that we've got the cart before the horse. What we need to do is forget about the body and the mind right now, and we're going to focus on that page 52 stuff. And once that is overcome, then we straighten out mentally and physically. Welcome to becoming a recovered alcoholic. If you want to know the magic handshake, the magic wand, or whatever you describe it, there it is, in specific order. So, in dealing with the resentments, we set them on paper. So in order to do a 4-step, I guess I need paper. They told us precisely what we need to do. There we go. And in order to put it on paper, what else are we going to need? A pen or a pencil. How about that? Unless you want to do it in blood, but that's a little drastic in my mind. So I got to get me some pen and get me some paper. Too simple. Now, what we're going to do in dealing with these resentments, we set them on paper, we listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. And I've got to understand what a resentment is. Because you know what? They introduced that word angry, and so many of us get twisted off. And I looked at my sponsor, and I'm going through this, and I'm like, I'm at the 24-hour club. I got 2 nickels to rub together, and I don't know where the next nickel's coming from. And I'm like, if you want me to write down every time I've been angry, you're going to need to bring a truck full of paper, because I was born, they didn't have to spank me. I came out screaming. I've been an angry little man for a long, long time. And he said, hold on a second. You've got to understand what a resentment is. And later on, and they're going to start introducing words like grudge, harboring such feelings. See, I've got to understand what a resentment is. And a resentment is, yes, someone upset me. I got angry. Someone cut me off on traffic in the way here. It really happened, believe it or not. There was a guy in Oklahoma that was just being friendly, I guess, in his own special way last night. And he's doing a whole lot of stuff to us. I guess we're in Texas plates. I understand all that stuff. But, and giving the international sign of peace, except he left out a finger, and all of that stuff. And, did it upset me? Yes. Did I get angry? Sure. Did I think about him today? No. When I drive back home, am I going to be looking for that car on the way back going, that's him, and drive 50 miles out of the way trying to chase him down? Probably not. But what is a resentment? The best one I can give you, Bill's got a list. I'll use my own personal list. Why? Because they're mine and I like them. Because it's all about me today, right? Yeah. Oh my. How about a resentment? Paul, my best friend growing up out of high school, he was like my brother. I have one sister. I never had a brother. I really wasn't close to a whole lot of people, but this guy, he was like my brother, and I told him everything. He told me everything. I trusted him more than I trusted anybody that I had met up to that point in life. One day I found out he slept with my girlfriend. Think I got angry? Just a little bit. But let's play this thing out. 20 years later, I'm introduced to a guy named Paul as I'm living in Dallas, and what's going through my mind? I swear to God, I'm over it, and all of a sudden my mind, something reminds me of it. The name Paul comes up. I rethink it. I replay it in my mind. It's like someone playing with a remote control called My Life, and all of a sudden we're going back to 1985, and someone's hitting play. And I get to rethink, and I get to replay, and I get to refeel all those emotions that happened to me the minute I found out when Paul slept with my girlfriend, and it was like it was happening all over again 20 years later. Now that is a resentment. That grudge, that harboring those feelings, whether it be a day later, whether it be 10 days later, whether it be 10 years later. What is truly a resentment? So we're going to write these lists down. And all we're going to do, we're not going to write down why, we're going to write down Paul. If you look at the example on page 65, if you put your hand over everything but the first column, we're making a grocery list, and we're going to list the people, the institutions, and the principals with whom we're angry. My dad, he was a brutal alcoholic. So Dad makes the list. Paul, the IRS, the Garland Police Department, the motorcycles not wearing seat belts. I'll get to that. So we're just going to make a list. And this isn't that big of a deal. If I can't get honest with a blank sheet of paper, I am not going to live. Do you understand? They told us in how it works. If I can't get honest with a blank sheet of paper, no one else around, me inviting God in, please help me with this 4-step. Help me go through this thing. If I can't get honest for moving the stuff that's racing around my brain for the last 35 years and put it down on a piece of paper, I don't stand a chance. I cannot get honest with myself in a blank sheet of paper. So I'm going to list these people, these institutions, the Garland Police Department, the principals, the seatbelt, and no on motorcycle, no seatbelt. The next part's the fun part. We asked ourselves why we were angry. Paul, he slept with my girlfriend. My dad, he was a brutal alcoholic. I learned to take a right hook from him. Whatever. If you go down the list, the IRS, they take all my money. The guy named FICA, I don't know who he is, but he takes money too. The motorcycle cop. I got a seatbelt on 635, a seatbelt violation on 635 in Dallas. I understand that I'm supposed to wear a seatbelt. The only problem was I got pulled over by a motorcycle cop, and he wrote me a $150 ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. The man then proceeded to get back onto his motorcycle and drive off into traffic. The principle of the idea that he doesn't have to wear a seatbelt and I do kind of rubs me the wrong way. I don't mind that I should do it, but he doesn't even have one. And I'm being unsafe. It wasn't funny to me at all. What is a principle? It's a rule, a law, things we have to abide by. That's all we're looking at. What's stuck in our craw, and we list them out. It's all this stuff that when I got drunk, I told you all about my dad. When I got drunk, I told you all about what Paul did. And here, when I'm sober, why is it that I am deathly afraid of writing this down? It is too simple. Who it is, what happened. I don't have to go into a Hemingway rendition of, well, it was June 14th, it was a sunny day when Paul slept with you. No! What is really the problem? He slept with my girlfriend. Too simple. So now we're going to look, we've got the middle column down. Now we're going to look at the next column. It says, in most cases we found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. On our grudge list. God, is that a lovely word. What do you do with a grudge? Now you know what a resentment is. I'm hanging on to that thing, and even when I don't know I'm hanging on to it, I'm hanging on to it. How many times have you said, I'm over that one? It's okay, I've forgiven him. Yet 5 years later, it's eaten your butt one more time. It's an amazing thing. So on our grudge list, we set opposite each name and our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relationships which have been interfered with? Let's look at Paul. Paul slept with my girlfriend. Did it affect my self-esteem? No, I was feeling better about myself when it happened. I don't think so. How about my security? How did I describe Paul? I trusted him more than anybody I'd trusted up to that point in my life. I wasn't really big on letting people in. You grow up in an alcoholic family, that's how it goes. I let him in, and my security was ruined. How about this? Our ambitions. Do you think it affected my ambitions? This guy was like a brother to me. I assumed we were going to grow up in the same town. We'd get married, we'd raise our kids in the same town. They'd be on the same t-ball team. And, I just assumed that he was going to be there, I was going to be there, and it's what it's supposed to be like. So much for those ambitions, right? How about the next one? Our personal relations. Some will say, well, yeah, it was your friend. How about even further than that? I go home and my mom's asking me, Mike, why aren't you hanging around with Paul anymore? Shit. There's a conversation you want to have with your mom, right? No. Now we got to pick whose friends stay with who. We had common friends. All right, whose side are you on? It affected all my personal relationships. How about my sex relationships? I think so. I think he got me there too, didn't he? Oh, man. He got me across the board. Too simple. What did it affect? And if someone didn't affect any of that, are they going to make my list? No, it's the guy in Oklahoma. You know what? He really didn't affect any of that. It's all good. Moving on. Bye-bye. So we're usually as definite as this example. I gave you mine. It says, here's the next. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. So I start from now and I work my way back. So many of us want to go, you know what? Do I start out when I was 3? Because that's when I first remembered things. Well, the instructions say start now and work your way back through your life. Go through it. But nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. Remember, I'm just getting honest with a sheet of paper. It says, when we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that the world and its people were often quite wrong. Hell yes, they were. Was Paul wrong? We all agree, right? It's pretty easy. A 4-year-old is walking up and going, that ain't right. Pretty simple. But to conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. Why would you go any further? You're wrong. I know it. Let's move on. The usual outcome is that people continue to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. No kidding. Even when we were right, have you ever been right before and it still wasn't right? That was a hard pill to swallow. Sometimes it ain't about being right. It is plain that life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, the business of resentment is infinitely grave. Boy, there's some well-chosen words, right? Infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. I wish he'd quit sugarcoating things. For when harboring such feelings, that harboring, we're back to that grudge. What are we doing? When harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit, the insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They might be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. Did everyone get the moral of that paragraph? Those last two paragraphs are not pretty. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. We turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, how about that, had that power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. You ever tried to wish away a resentment? Doesn't work very good, does it? How did I get back at Paul 15 years later when I'm down in Texas and he's I don't know where, and all of a sudden I'm reminded of it, and I'm starting to chew on my tongue about what Paul did back in 1985? How did I get back at him? I opened a bottle of whiskey and started pouring it down my throat till it darn near killed me. That'll show him. Who owned who? My God, he's sleeping like a baby somewhere, has probably forgotten about it. And this guy owns me. Think about it. How must these be mastered? This was our course to realize that people who were wrong were perhaps spiritually sick. Quite possibly. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. So here's our first prayer for the 4-step on resentments. We ask God to help us show the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. And I know, if anybody's like me, I remember chewing on my tongue over resentment, and I'm calling my sponsor, and he said, well, did you do the prayer? Nope. Why? I don't see how that's going to help me. And he said, well, why don't you do it and call me back later? Click. Because he didn't care whether I thought it was going to work or not. What did he care about? Did I do the action that was laid out for me? And if I do that action, whether I believe it or not, look what it tells us. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. There's the promise of the prayer. Here I'm looking at Paul. I do the prayer. I follow through with the action. God's already starting to change it a little. I still don't know the truth about it, but God's helping me take a kindly and tolerant view to each and every one of these people. It's the most powerful prayer. So referring to our list again, putting out of the minds of the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Oh, there's a unique concept, isn't it? I've heard arguments in AA that there's no such thing as a fourth column. I don't understand it, but it's just not in the example. But look what it tells us. Referring to our list again, putting out of the minds of the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Point blank questions, aren't they? Here's where we're going to take a look and see our part in each one of these items. Where is my part? What I saw in the Paul thing, I looked at it, and my honest assessment was I being selfish? I really didn't think I needed to share. I didn't think so. I went through and I didn't write down what my sponsor thought, what I thought my sponsor was looking for. I got brutally honest and I wrote down what I saw. Was I selfish? I didn't see it. Was I dishonest? No, I'm pretty sure this upset me and I didn't want to share. This is what I came up with. Was I being self-seeking? I did not see it. But was I frightened? Oh, this thing scared the living crap out of me, and I wrote it down. That was my own personal assessment of the situation at the time of doing my 4-step. Now, it's really easy to look at someone else's stuff when it's not personal to you, and we all know how to do this. You go back to the example on page 65. Let's look at the employer. My employer, he's unreasonable, unjust, and overbearing. He threatens to fire me for drinking and padding my expense account. In other words, I'm mad at my boss because I'm drinking on the job and I'm stealing from him, and he's going to fire me over it, and I think he's just a little unjust and unreasonable, and he's a little overbearing. Am I being selfish? Just a smidge? Am I being dishonest? I'm stealing from him. Am I being self-seeking? Oh, it's all about me, ain't it? I got this thing rolling just the way I want it to be. Am I in fear? Oh, heck yeah. Why would I care about whether he's unjust or overbearing if he wasn't about to fire me? I'm in fear. I'm stealing from him. Look at this. It just stands out like a sore thumb. This whole situation's based on fear. Nail it down. Pretty easy to see. We're just going to go through each and every one of them and look at, where am I selfish? Where am I dishonest? Where am I self-seeking? Where am I in fear over this thing? It's pretty straightforward. It says, though the situation happened entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. We're not taking Paul's inventory here. We're taking my inventory. Where's my part? When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admit our wrongs honestly, and we're willing to set these matters straight. Notice the word fear bracketed alongside the difficulties of Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and his wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence is shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstance which brought misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. Fear is a God-given thing. We all have it. It keeps us from walking out in front of fast-moving vehicles, right? I mean, fear is a good thing. It keeps us alive. But for alcoholics, we kind of run amok with it, don't we? And here's all we're going to do. We're going to review our fears thoroughly. What are we afraid of? We're going to put them on paper, even though we have no resentment in connection with them. We're just going to go through and what are we afraid of? Afraid of dying. I'm afraid of drinking again. I'm afraid of my sponsor. I'm afraid of his sponsor. It's my sponsor's sponsor. That old guy scared the heck out of me. And I was afraid to have more than $10 in my pocket. Anybody been there before? I was afraid I was never going to have more than $10 in my pocket. I was afraid, what if I win the lottery? What if I become successful? What if I never become successful? And I just went through the list. What are we afraid of? Then we asked ourselves why we had them. I'm afraid of dying. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I'm afraid of drinking again. I know what happens when I drink again. And I just go through this list. We're just going to do the same thing we did with the resentments as we did. We're going to do the same thing with fears as we did with the resentments. We're just going to do an inventory. They showed us how to do it. And then they introduced some stuff. Wasn't it because our self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. We talked about it. When things are going my way, God is great, the program's great, right? When I'm about to lose my job, what am I thinking about? What can I do how do I change this? What do I do? What if I lose it? And I start the ball rolling. And where do I go? I go from reliance upon God, and I go right to self-reliance. And how well has self-reliance worked out with you in your life to this point? Well, they say, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance is good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. It says some of us once had great self-confidence, but didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other problem. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so. Thank God. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. Remember, God is going to provide what we need if we do what? Stay close to Him and perform His work well. I am going to trust God knows what He's doing. He's calling the shots. He's the director. I'm just the actor. He's the father. I'm the child. It says we trust in an infant God rather than our finite selves. We're in the world to play the role He assigns. Just to the extent as we do, Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely upon Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity? How about that? No matter how much chaos I've got in my life, reliance upon God and sticking to God knows what He's doing, He's going to match all that calamity with serenity. What a promise. We never apologize for anyone depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality is a way of weakness. I swore it was for the weak. I found out later inside the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous working this program, here's the truth. Paradoxically, is a way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. Here's the fear prayer. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention of what He would have us to be. The promise, at once we commence to outgrow fear. So now I've got a resentment inventory. Now I've got a fear inventory looking just like the resentment. Now I'm 2/3 of the way through and I got about 10 minutes to talk about sex, and that's never long enough for talking about sex. But we're going to do it. Now about sex. Many of us need an overhauling there, but above all, we try to be sensible on this question. It's easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cries that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Oh, then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. Our school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. Underline that. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. Underline that. We all have sex problems. Underline that. There's no reading between the line. It says we'd hardly be human if we didn't, but what can we do about them? See, this thing isn't about judging what someone deems, and we get all twisted up about the sex thing as being the act. Oh, you want to hear about all those immoral things that I think I've done? Well, no. Let's find out what it really means. What is a sex inventory? We reviewed our sex conduct over the past years. Where had we been selfish? Where had we been dishonest, inconsiderate? Whom did we hurt? It's nothing about the act. It's about how did we treat the people we so-called cared about. These people that we said, oh, I love you, don't leave me. I'll never do it again. Think about it. We treated complete strangers better than we treated the people we so-called cared about. And all we're going to do is go through and look at who are these people? How did we harm them? Straightforward. What did it affect? Here's a fun one. Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? You ever tell her that, honey, I'm going to be over at Joe's house. You leave the house and you're making damn sure you're not going to be at Joe's. So when she calls, she gets to figure out where I'm at. That'll teach her. Anybody been there before? Fun stuff, arousing bitterness. That jealousy, flirting with that girl over there in the corner just so she can see me do it, just so I can get back at her because I'm just really not happy with her right now. Nice. Oh, man. Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all done on paper and looked at it. It is hard to duck and dodge this one. I didn't see that stuff with Paul, but oh my God, it's where was I selfish? Where was I dishonest? Where was I inconsiderate? Where was I full of fear? And looking at this stuff, I didn't know anything about relationships. Mine were hostage situations. You were either going to do what I wanted you to do, or I was going to try to brainwash you into doing what I was going to do, or I eventually had to make you go away. What a great way to have a relationship. Know all about it. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal of our future sex life. Obviously, there was nothing sane or sound about mine. It says, we subject each relationship to the test, was it selfish or not? Here's the first sex prayer. We got a couple of them for this fourth step. We ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. Obviously, our old way of doing things wasn't sane and wasn't sound. We obviously need a new way, and here's where we're going to ask God for help. It says, remember always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. Whatever our ideals turn out to be, we must be willing to go toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we've done harm, provided we do not bring about still more harm in doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, here's our prayer. We ask God what we should do about each specific matter, and here's the promise. The right answer will come, and here's the hook, if you want it. Boy, how many right answers have you got that you didn't want? And the fact of the matter is, the answers will come if you want them. The most repeated, if you sponsor anyone, this is probably one you're going to hear a lot of coming back from people you're sponsoring. God alone can judge our sex situation. That is wonderful, that is true, but look at the next sentence. Counsel with others. With other person is often desirable. Who's that other person? Your sponsor, who knows you best about your hostage situations. Your sponsor. But let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice, like shopping for the right answer in your group. If my sponsor didn't give it to me, I'm going to ask the next 10 people who I think like me for the right answer. Anybody ever try that before? A lot of hysterical thinking and advice comes that way. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? So you know what? So I'm sobering up and I get in another relationship and it turns into a hostage situation and things go bad. Does that mean I'm going to get drunk? Well, some people tell us so. It says, but it's only half truth. It depends on our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we'll be forgiven and we'll learn our lesson. If we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. We are not saints. We will fall short. But the fact of the matter is, if I continue to be a low-down SOB, they tell me, and I don't change, and I'm not willing to change, and I'm not sorry for what I've done, and I'm not bringing God into the picture here, guess what, buddy? You're going to be doing some drinking. It's not their opinion. It's out of their experience. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for the guidance in each questionable situation, for the sanity and the strength to do the right thing. How about that? What a great little prayer. It says, sex is very troublesome. We throw ourselves harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. You get all caught up in that. My sponsor looked at me and said, get your big book and go help another drunk who was dying just like you. I'm working on my 4th step, and I'm like, how can I help him? And he goes, you got 8 days sober. Go help a guy with 8 minutes sober. You aren't going to walk him through the work, but you can give him a little hope that he just might be able to make it another 8 days. Have a nice day. Pretty straightforward. We think of their needs and work for them. It takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the impulsive surge. When to yield would mean heartache. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we've written down about a page, huh? I love a guy coming in. It's like, I'm done. He pulls out a little, I'm done. Really? Let me take you back to this page. We have written down a lot. It says, we have listed and analyzed our resentments. We've begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward men, even our enemies, for we look at them as sick people. The only way that'll happen is if you start using that resentment prayer. Remember what the promise was to that? There it is. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. They keep planting that seed. Have you noticed? That's the 3rd time they start planting that 9th step seed. It says in this book, you read again and again, that faith did for us what you could not do for ourselves. We hope that you are now convinced that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you've already made a decision, step 3 in an inventory of gross or handicap. Step 4, you have made a good beginning. I'll never forget, I showed my sponsor, I'm done. I felt like I have done something. Look at me. And he goes, welcome. You finally did something. You've started. You've made a beginning. I was so crushed. I thought I had done something special. I did, but again, I did the first thing AA asked me to do. That being so, we have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about ourselves, and I'll leave it with this. The truth will set you free, but until then, it'll beat the living crap out of you. Amen.
All right, thank you. Great.